planning board meeting, Boulder Planning Board meeting for October 3rd, 2019 to order. So the first item is approval of minutes. We have 3 sets of minutes for approval, and I sent out to planning board a set of updates to the September 19 minutes so that folks could look at them prior to this approval. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes or any discussion?
I wasn't here for the September 19th. As I was absent on September 19th, I'll abstain from voting on those.
Okay. Well, we can do a vote for each set of minutes. Why don't we start with a motion to approve the August 15th, 2019 minutes?
I'll move to approve that.
A second? Seconded by Lupita. The motion is by Gerstle. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. The motion passes 6-0. The approval of the August 22nd, 2019 minutes. A motion?
A motion to approve.
Okay. A motion is from Lupita Montoya, and second?
I'll second.
John? Seconded by Gerstle. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and then finally, motion to approve the September 19th, 2019 minutes.
Can you just tell us what you changed? What you added or took out?
There were several changes that I sent red lines around. If you want to wait, we can just,
Yeah, I can't tell.
we can do these minutes on the next planning board meeting,
Would that
if you'd
be-
rather look at what I changed.
I didn't have a chance to look.
Okay,
Okay.
that's fine. Then we're going to table the approval of the September 19th, 2019 minutes until the next planning board meeting.
Yeah, let me just comment on that. I did read them, but I wasn't in the meeting, so I was prepared to approve them, but I won't be there when you finally approve them. So just when you do get to it, you can know you have my support.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks for your flexibility.
Great. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is public participation, and this item is for members of the public who wish to address the planning board on any item that's not on the agenda tonight. So tonight we have, and for call-up items, tonight we have a couple of call-ups, and our public hearing is around a form-based code review for 3001 Pearl Parkway. So if you want to speak to that, you have to speak to the Pearl Parkway matter after we've heard the presentation for that. But if you have any public comment to make on any other item, then you're welcome to do so now. Do we have any members of the public signed up? Okay. Anybody want to speak to any matter that is not on the agenda right now? Okay, then I'm going to close the public participation section. Move on to the discussion of dispositions, planning board call-ups, and continuations. We have 2 call-ups. I'm going to turn it over to staff. Charles, would you like to lead us through the 2 call-ups?
Sure, so we have 2 call-ups. Both of them are wetland permits. The first one is for replacement of a bridge over Wonderland Creek in the conveyance zone, and then the second one is the replacement of a culvert pipe.
Does anybody have any comments or questions about those call-ups? Okay. Okay, then we're going to move on to the public hearing. We have 1 item on the public agenda tonight. This is a public hearing to consider a form-based code review application number LUR 2019-0028. It's for the second sequence of redevelopment for the 30 Pearl site, generally located at 3001 Pearl Parkway. And I'm going to turn it over to Charles.
Great. Thanks very much. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'm going to turn it over to Elaine McLaughlin to take you through staff's analysis.
Thanks, Charles. Good evening, everyone. I'm just going to start with a brief overview of where we're headed this evening. I'm going to go over the process to date, which has actually got some formidable background there. We'll look at the planning context and the built context, and we'll do a light touch on the proposed project, hoping that the applicant will carry that. The key issues for this evening are pretty simple. Does this meet the form-based code? And if not, does it meet the criteria for exceptions? So this is just a brief snapshot of the context, and it's important to take a long view of the council initiatives and the planning processes that brought us here tonight for this site. It began in 2001 when the city and RTD partnered to purchase an 11.2 acre area of land to establish a regional transit center near the Boulder Valley Regional Center and the rail line. And then after that acquisition, the city embarked on a 2-year planning process and adopted the Transit Village Area Plan. And the clear intent was not only to establish that regional transit facility, but also to create a new neighborhood and establish parameters that allow for that critical mass, that density in the placemaking that'll make for a successful transit-oriented development. So TVAP was adopted in 2007, and the intent was to transform it to a higher density mixed-use urban neighborhood in 2 phases and to help address our jobs, housing imbalance. And one of the key issues in the Transit Village Area Plan was to provide for affordable housing. So it was adopted as part of the TVAP was a connections plan, as this area had been large super blocks, and it was a way to break up the large super blocks, create greater connectivity, and that then became part of the transportation master plan. So these roadways that were approved in our last go-around have been planned for in this location since 2007. And then it's important to note that after that, the city did do a concept plan on this site, although the primary emphasis is on the transit center. And after that, both council and planning board weighed in, and then the city also invested in a number of infrastructure improvements, and not the least of which is the Pearl Parkway multi-way boulevard that was intended to allow vehicular movement, but also allow for a safe shared space for peds and bicyclists. And then the city also constructed the the shared street of Junction Place. And the idea was to create a seamless transition in a slowed street so people could cross from what is the Depot Square to the park. And so that was also implemented by the city. And then finally, the city also put in the Goose Creek Bridge to actually create a bridge between both sides of Boulder Junction. So as part of TVAP, the land use plan was adopted, and that established land uses that became the basis of comp plan land use, as well as ultimately a comprehensive rezoning that the city undertook for this area. And you'll note that the subject property that's outlined in red is mixed use 2 under the Transit Village. And the vision of this redevelopment is to be essentially 3- and 4-story mixed use buildings, so fairly large buildings. And the land use typologies is also, in this case, consistent with BVCP policies that indicate that the city's going to encourage well-designed mixed use and higher density development that also have a substantial amount of affordable housing in proximity to transit and multimodal corridors. Then that MU2 plan became the basis for mixed-use business comprehensive plan land use designation. And in this case, it indicated that housing and public uses supporting housing will be encouraged and may even be required. So that then translated to that comprehensive rezoning that I mentioned in the mid-2000s to MU4 as mixed-use residential areas generally intended for residential use with neighborhood serving retail and offices. Also anticipated it'll be in a pedestrian-oriented pattern with buildings built up to the street, so really emphasizing that urban configuration that then the form-based code was adopted to establish. So when we zero in at this now 5.45 acre site itself, you can see, of course, today it's a vacant parking lot. It was the Pollard Motor Company dealership until recently. And we'll just walk around the site as we did with the initial sequence of development just to get our head around what the context is. And as you'll note, going through these images, it's really clearly a horizontal mix of uses, a very well fine-grained, defined horizontal mix of uses that have a walkable context for this site. So it's ideally suited to the uses that are planned, the high-density residential. Mm-hmm. So when the board approved that initial sequence of redevelopment on this site earlier this year in quadrants 2 and 4, it included 120 permanently affordable residential units for individuals with 30 to 60% area median income, as well as a below-grade parking structure, 2 new paseos, and also approved were those 2 new streets that are shown in the project plans. So, and as you can see, it got fleshed out, and this was what was approved. But then for tonight's discussion, the remaining parcels that are proposed to infill the final pieces of redevelopment, we'll drill down to take a look at what the 30 Pearl neighborhood in totality will look like. And planned in its entirety are 292 residential units with 40% or 120 units that are the permanently affordable. The remaining parcels include the 8 buildings with buildings 1A, B, and C that are planned as 77 market rate residential units between the 3 of them. And then ground floor retail that faces 30th Street. There's also below-grade parking below this quadrant 1. And then buildings 3A and B up on the north side are planned with 58 residential units between the 2 of them. 4A is 29 units of residential. And then the townhomes that are adjacent to the park are 10 residential units. So for this particular sequence, it's 172 units, along with roughly 18,000 square feet of commercial space that's intended to be retail, restaurant, or entertainment, and including affordable retail space. So there's also these 2 new paseos, connections, and construction of the planned pocket park. So key issues for tonight are whether or not the project's consistent with the form-based code, as I noted, and we'll start with that first key issue. And we begin with the regulatory plan from form-based code, which identifies specific functional aspects for the site. In this case, the required building typology for quadrant 1 is Main Street storefront building, and that's defined as a highly pedestrian-oriented mixed-use building with ground story storefront required along all type A streets. And it defines that as personal, service, retail, dining, entertainment, and that's intended to provide activity. And upper stories are flexible, parking's at the rear or off-site. And there is a requirement for storefront at 30th and Pearl Parkway, or rather 30th, yes, and returning to 30th Pearl Parkway. And for building 1A, it's that view shed that must be maintained, and that's why it's primarily 3 stories for that first building. And there's also that new type A street frontage that is now considered the new Spruce Street, as well as type B street, which is the new 31st Street, also approved last go-round. And then there's paseo requirements as well as a multi-use path requirement. So there's a lot of different plan elements that are required from this regulating plan for that first quadrant in particular. The rest of the site's a general building type, and that's what we looked at in the last go-round. It essentially serves as urban fabric. It's a basic building type. It's considered to be built along the sidewalk with different uses. And there's a portion of the building 4A that's a long junction place that's required to be 4 stories. So you see that step up in the building as we go through the images. There's also the waterfront type A frontage that's actually along Goose Creek. So that's intended to be somewhat like the type A street. And then, of course, 31st Street is the type B. There's paseo requirements. And it's important to note that the regulating plan identified this spot as the pocket park. So when we look at the site itself, you can see that it meets the regulating plan requirements, particularly for those plan lines, as we talked about. With regard to consistency with the form-based code for the site, when we start with quadrant 1 buildings, A, B, and C, they meet the requirements for the major and minor materials with all 3 buildings planned as primarily brick as the major material, and then having wood composite as a minor material, as well as metal panel, but in a fairly contemporary style for buildings 1B and 1C and 1A and 1B. 1C is the one that tends to have a more traditional vernacular. All of the buildings meet the form-based code elements, and there is a request for some exceptions that I'll go over in just a little bit. Buildings 3 and B are designed as 3- and 4-story buildings that are located between that new Spruce Street and the Goose Creek corridor, and both are proposed with red brick as the major material, along with metal panel, little bit of wood composite and frosted glass as a minor material, and this was found to meet the requirements of the form-based code, along with those other key requirements. There's some minor exceptions to the form-based code, and then we'll go over those in the next issue. And then I'll just go through a couple more of the sort of batched images of these planned buildings. 4A is at the corner of Junction Place and Spruce Street. It's also a 3- and 4-story building, and that 3 stories really is intended to ensure that that view shed corridor is maintained per the form-based code. And the majority of the materials meet the form-based code for major and minor materials, again, with brick, wood composite. This is a different type of, like a dark plum color brick and gray. So there's variations in the color of brick that's going to be employed. It meets the requirements as noted in the previous for streetscape standards, where you locate parking, the number of stories, et cetera. And there are some exceptions requested for Building 4A. The townhomes are located fronting the park, the pocket park, and meet the major and minor materials palette, again, with brick as the primary material. And there's no exceptions requested for the townhomes, and were found to meet all of the form-based code criteria. So that new pocket park is planned at the northeast corner of the neighborhood near the apex of where Junction Place and Goose Creek corridor meet, consistent with the location that's identified in TVAP. And so from an urban design perspective that was considered in both TVAP and the form-based code, the location of the park is at the visual terminus from the intersection of Pearl Parkway and Junction Place. And so combined with the shared street, again, as we looked at with the existing images, it's to create a seamless public space from the park to the regional bus facility, and also to create a connection to the Goose Creek bike path to and from the regional bus facility. So there's a lot of connectivity inherent in the park. In terms of consistency with the code, there's a little more than half an acre that meets the minimum maximum size. There's more than the minimum amount of street frontage. The playground will be provided, imperviousness is provided, and access to the open water is going to remain. It's currently undeveloped, but it's planned to include the natural landscape, shaded seating, nature play, and a turf lawn, and specific programming is intended to occur at technical document in concert with City Park staff and the applicant. So for key issue number 2, the questions if the board finds the requested exceptions meet the criteria. And just as a reminder, they can be granted if it's consistent with TVAP and won't create adverse impacts, and if there's site conditions, or if there's site conditions that weren't created by the applicant and make it impractical to do the form-based code, or if the alternative is the minimum to provide relief. So for quadrant 1, the applicant's requesting the use of semi-permeable pavers through the pedestrian travelway and paseos instead of concrete. And as the applicant noted, the use of pavers to replace gray concrete achieves the intent of pedestrian movement, but it also allows for semi-pervious surface on the site. And you can see when you overlay the parking structure, or in this case, underlay the parking structure, you can see that there's a challenge with trying to achieve perviousness when you have a parking structure below, but the applicant is providing 18 inches of soil volume above the garages. That helps with semi-permeability and also the growth of plant materials. And so staff finds this exception to meet the criteria in that it achieves TVAP goals of creating a new urban neighborhood by allowing for parking to go below grade and creating more of an urban streetscape. And it's the most efficient to have that below grade parking. And then Buildings B1 and BC require an exception to the Build To zone for the corner and Type A frontage, and I'm going to drill into Building 1C to illustrate this. So in both cases, the exception is due to the challenge in meeting another standard, which is ensuring that the buildings don't exceed a maximum 150-foot length. So you can see that the building is 150 feet, but where that roadway is established is a little bit longer. So with that approved alignment for 31st Street and 30th, it's not possible for that building to touch both sides of that Build To zone. So what the applicant did is they shifted the building more to 30th Street and gave a more generous setback along 31st Street as essentially a buffer. And staff finds that this exception is consistent with TVAP. Again, it ensures that there's shorter building lengths and a more compact development, but still allows for an interesting streetscape. And the setback's not significantly greater. And then further, the north side of Building 3B and the townhomes also require exceptions to the Build To zone for that Type A frontage along Goose Creek. And in this case, staff finds the exception standards met because of that existing public service XL Piesco easement that's shown in blue. So that overlaps the Build To zone in the north. And so obviously we can't encroach with buildings into the Piesco easement. So we have noted that this wasn't an individual condition that was created by the applicant. So it makes it impractical and is an acceptable exception. And then it's also important to note that in this case, the Goose Creek corridor is further down from the site. So there's not as much of a relationship between this Type A type of street and this building 3A and 3B. Then on the north side of Building 1C, the applicant is requesting exception to allow for residential on a portion of that Spruce Street, that new Spruce Street. So instead of it being retail down along the entire Spruce Street, just the first 42 feet are, and it wraps, of course, along 30th Street. And that exception also is necessitated to be less of a window transparency. It's, so the applicant is pointing out that privacy is important in this context. And given the fact that there's residential across Spruce Street, it makes some sense that this also mimic that typology in this location. And staff finds that this is also consistent with TVAP in that it makes for a more urban streetscape, and it also allows for a greater percentage of affordable housing in this context. Again, more residential units here could help then translate to that greater percentage of affordability that's necessary. Then the applicant has approached the design of the entrances along the store frontages of buildings 1A and 1B that doesn't create that specific 3 feet 8 inch depth. Rather, they've designed the second story to cantilever or overhang in a way that does create the recess so it meets the intent. And again, staff finds that it's consistent with the TVAP criteria to design buildings with pedestrian scale materials, architectural articulation, particularly on the first floor. So there is a differentiation between the first and second floor. It creates that architectural dynamic, and staff finds that it meets that criteria. And then there is an exception to how the wood walls, how a window fits into the wood walls. There's a requirement in TVAP that the depth be 2 inches, and in this case, it's less than 2 inches, and the applicants indicated they're utilizing essentially a nailing fin, and they can help explain this a little bit better than I can, but the intent is for better waterproofing. In this case, there's also a metal fin that they're using in this context, and it helps create that shadow line that's the intent of this recess. Because this is used in the wood composite material, which is considered a minor material in all the applications, it seems like a reasonable exception, and it's still, again, most of the deep recesses would be in the pedestrian zone, again, consistent with TVAP. And then Finally, there's an exception that's necessary for the transformer location. It's a regional transformer along 30th Street. The applicant has treated it with a really interesting architectural element to screen it. And again, there's a certain impracticality in relocating this regional transformer. And with that, public notification, it's important to note, has the requirements of 943 have been met. There were no public comments received on this. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Elaine. So this is our chance as the planning board to ask specific questions of staff and try to make them specific and succinct if you have questions, and if you can anticipate that they would be kind of nitty-gritty design questions that would be better held for the applicant, just hold them for the applicant, and you can ask after the applicant's presentation. Does anybody have any questions? John?
Yeah, thanks for that presentation.
I think your mic may be off.
Thanks for that presentation. So I have a couple questions with respect to the paseos and the public transit options and the permeability. I noticed that there are between buildings 1A and 1B, and between 1B and 1C, that there are spaces, but it's not clear to me whether that's intended to include paths and whether they will be open to the public.
Well, let me pop open some exhibits. This is between 1B and 1C, and there is that paseo that goes between buildings 1B and 1C. And the paseos have to be open, and they are required to have a public access easement dedicated as part of the conditions of approval. So that is a necessity, that is a requirement.
So there will be ungated public
Correct.
access through there?
Yes.
And what about between 1A and 1B?
So that one doesn't necessitate a public access easement, and this is, again, based on the form-based code and what's required. What are the required connections that are allowed to be open to the public? The paseo is open to the public. Pearl Parkway is open to the public, and 31st Street. And those are essentially 150-foot increments that someone can get to quite easily. And whether or not between A and B would be open, I don't know. It wasn't something that staff focused on, again, because it's not part of the form-based code.
So who would make that determination then?
Well, again, it's because it's not part of the form-based code, that's unlikely to be something that you could recommend, but I'll defer to Charles and Hella on that.
Well, I think we just followed the adopted connections plan in TVAP that was reflected in the form-based code. So everywhere there was meant to be planned public connections, we're achieving planned public connections. So there's some ancillary connections between buildings. Those aren't required to be public because they didn't require or they didn't appear in the adopted network plan.
You might also ask the applicant if the intent is to keep them open or not. I've not seen images of it being gated, so having a gate across, I suppose because it's not a public access easement is up to them.
Okay, and so with respect to those which are intended to be public and which are expressly stated so, who is responsible for enforcing that it stays open? And I ask this because, as Charles knows, I've been concerned about other projects in which there was an intention to keep a public path open for pedestrians, and it's been gated and
If there's a public
There seems to be nobody taking responsibility for that.
In that particular example, there was no public access easement, and going back on the record, it was never intended to be public. In this case, it's an adopted connection with a dedicated public access easement over it, where the city is a part of that easement, so it couldn't be vacated without us being party to that. If they did put a fence up or a gate and locked it, we could certainly enforce against that based on the development approval and the development agreement. Penalties could be anywhere up to actually revoking the approval, so I think we have a lot of recourse if that were the case.
Okay, thank you. We can talk about that other example
I'm happy
in a
to.
different situation.
Sure.
So then also, I was wondering, if I understand correctly, there's an underground garage underneath most of this area with 18 inches of soil on top of that. But in the maps that we're seeing here, it looks like there's large trees along portions of the street. I don't understand how with 18 inches of soil, it's reasonable to expect large trees along the street.
Right. Well, in this case, you can see that the extent of the garage goes to the extent of the building. So within the public right-of-way, it'll be the soil depth, obviously, that'll be able to take a large maturing tree. So it's really limited to just within the building, footprint.
So, for example, along the north-south passageways, between Pearl and Spruce, we can't really expect significant trees. Is that correct? Or
Well, and I think it's a really good question for their landscape architect, but I think that some of the soil volume could be done in potted above ground plants, but I think the point is really to be able to achieve the urban configuration that's expected here. There has to be some balance between what occurs on that site and then what can occur in the streetscapes around it. And I would like to defer to the landscape architect on that so they could explain some of that better.
okay, thank you.
I promise.
Sarah?
These aren't design, I will hold my design questions for the developer. Two questions. One is on page 274 of our packet. It talks about it says, quote, "Currently the land is owned by the city." Just curious if this is going to change, or if it doesn't change, what are the implications of the ownership with regards?
So I'm going to just suggest that Michelle Allen with Housing address that.
Hi, Michelle Allen, Inclusionary Housing Program Manager. So we do currently own the property, but pending this approval, we have already gotten disposition from council to sell Quadrant 1. We have a buyer. We put out an RFP and we got a bid, and we have a buyer for Quadrant 1. And then the parcels that will be going to BHP, which is the second quadrant and part of 4, those will all be disposed soon, in the next few weeks, once this approval is completed. And then once BHP constructs the northernmost garage, we will put out another RFP, and we will dispose and sell to market developers the 3 quadrants and that northern 4A quadrant. So we own it right now, but we're not going to own it too much longer.
So the implication of us not owning it any longer, we won't have any say over whether they're rentals, or, I mean, we might not in the first place, but are they rentals, are they for sale properties? I assume the townhomes are for sale, but.
So the BHP properties are rentals, and they're all covenanted affordable rentals. They're
Right.
not.
I'm actually talking about the for market, because we've already approved the BHP stuff.
Right. So we put out our RFP with the intent saying that we would like for sale product. As you're all probably aware, there are some barriers to for-sale development in Colorado right now. And so the purchaser of Quadrant 1 has basically, there's no covenant, those are market units. What we negotiated with them was that they will initially be rentals, but they will condo them right off the bat so that they can be converted to for sale once the construction defect law period expires.
Okay.
So that's what they're reluctant to make them for sale right off the bat.
Okay, and is it this may just be an assumption, that that will be the same, you'll try for the same kind of agreement on on Quadrant 3?
Yes.
Okay, and just don't go anywhere, because this is a question about 4A. The packet says building 4A is market rate co-housing. And I don't quite know what that means, since they're all apartments that are in self-completed apartments. So what does that mean?
Right, so we haven't put out an RFP for a purchaser for either the 3 parcels or 4A. So we will put out an RFP probably around mid next year, and we will say we are looking for a buyer who will meet these different criteria. We would like 3A and B and the townhomes to all be for sale, but we have to have a willing purchaser who is willing to do that. And as I said, on 1, there was sort of a compromise. I wouldn't be at all surprised if that's what we end up on the 3 parcels. 4A is a little bit different because we are looking for co-housing. And we don't know what kind of offers we'll get yet, but that would be the intent.
Okay.
We can request it through the sales. We could even require it through the sale, but we might not be able to make a sale if we're too strict in what we require. So there's a balancing act of saying this is our intention, and then seeing what the market is going to offer out there.
Okay, that's helpful. And let me just follow up then. Do any of these projects come back through planning board as the quadrants are sold, or is this is it?
No, they wouldn't come back unless there were changes proposed.
Okay, so if 4A, for example, ends up not being co-housing, but is in fact not co-housing, then it would come back.
We'd have to run an amendment that would be subject to call up by the planning board.
Okay, great. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
And Charles, just to follow up on that, there won't even be any use reviews for the commercial uses that are embodied in some of these buildings?
Yeah, eventually, yeah.
Okay, so there will be some, just to clarify, that will come back to us, but they'll be for the use, not for changes to the site review or
That's right. And
form-based code review, I should say.
right, and in terms of building 4A, there is a community space that is shown on the northeast corner, and so it's set up to be really like a co-housing shared space if they wanted.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, who else on planning board has questions for staff? No one?
I'm good.
Okay, then I think the applicant in this hearing has asked us for 15 minutes, so if you can set the clock for 15, and we'll take the applicant presentation.
Good evening. I'm Laura Scheinbaum. I'm Development Director for Boulder Housing Partners. Happy to be here tonight. I had all these great comments planned, and Elaine stole my thunder with her really excellent presentation. So I don't know that I have a whole lot new to say, other than I did want to remind Planning Board and everyone here that, this is contemplated, it was brought forward in 2 phases, but really contemplated cohesively, coherently as one project. All of the entitlements have run through BHP. I think what you'll see is a site that really works well together and intended to work as, the inclusionary housing requirements for the market rate are being satisfied by BHP and the Affordable Housing Board building. From a money standpoint, it's important for all of those parcels to be able to move forward at the same time as we're developing our sites as well, so that, again, we have not standalone affordable projects out there. We also have the financing in place to be able to support the gap financing required for the affordable sites. Elaine already walked you through what was happening out there, but long intended outcomes desired by the city, including mixed use, mixed income, deep affordability, all being met by having a comprehensive project happening out at 30 Pearl. And you can also see down in the lower left-hand corner, 30 Pearl. We've gone through a branding exercise that will represent the entire site, not just the affordable pieces. So the logo that you see in the corner is actually for all the different parcels, including the market rate components. And then this is just who we are as a developer. We are co-master developing with the city. As you know, the city's owned the land for a long time. Conveyance approvals were made by city council last week, so we'll start to see a little bit of shifting of ownership. But really, this has been a partnership and collaboration with the city, with BHP and the city as co-master developer, working through Coburn to bring forward all the entitlements for all 5.4 acres. BHP is the housing authority, so we own and manage in perpetuity. We also develop. When we develop, as a developer, there are fees that we get, but we're mission-driven, so all of that goes right back into community benefit in the city. Just a little bit more about who we are. This is all probably very well known to you, but again, mission-driven developer, mission-driven organization. And again, one last thing before I turn this over to Bill, but a big shout out to both Housing Division and the city planning staff. We've worked very collaboratively to bring this forward very quickly, and so we thank you for your partnership, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bill Holicky with Coburn Architecture. So Elaine, that was really excellent, and I can stay away from painting the outlines and just give it some color. This is really humbling. We've been talking about this for 20 years, and to get this close to it, to be at the place where we're feeling this passionate about what we created in conjunction with the city and BHP and 10 years of community process. I actually didn't plan on saying that, but getting here right now and speaking to you, it kind of feels like the culmination of a massive effort, and we're really proud of the results. So, to that end, 10 years of public process. I mentioned this last time. I want to reiterate it because it's so important. We didn't view it as our job to reinvent anything. The community kind of decided what they want. Came in front of planning board a number of times, council a number of times. The framework plan and the final site plan, we're really excited that they are exactly the same. And John, to your point, all the pedestrian paths that are so critical to making a neighborhood pedestrian friendly are all in place. They all have public access easements, and to answer the question, you're not even allowed to erect a fence in a public access easement without council action. So in theory, you can't block the paths, and so that's a very big deal. I'll talk more about some of the questions here. So Elaine already explained what's going on in the buildings. This kind of gets to John's question. The northern one is considered to be a public park with public access through it. Again, public access easement protecting it, so you can't block it. The southern one was kind of accidental, and it's a result of the fact that the buildings can't be longer than 150 feet. When we started, this site was 2 buildings, and it just wasn't working right. Again, form-based code is prejudiced against big buildings, and when we show the aerial, I think we all agree that's a really good thing. So what ended up happening was the southern building split in half, and we ended up with this plaza in the middle. So it ended up being a gathering space. The idea is that, and to the right-hand side, on the eastern side of this gathering space, that's actually staff wanted a couple of loading zones for moving vans. So that's a place for a moving van. There's really not good pedestrian access out of that end. So it's considered like a little public plaza. Again, the developer could close that off. They would have to ask for that in the tech doc process, because right now there's no gates shown on that western side. But as of now, the intention is that that's just open for someone to use, and it would be more of a sitting area than a moving area. On the northeast side, again, the Paseo runs through from east to west, so we have one mid-block on both sides. This one terminates at the park, so it's pretty important. And this park that Elaine kind of referred to, we do have to do the final designs and the final plant call-outs in tech doc, but it was designed in conjunction with parks and staff, the form-based code requirements, the requirements for play area and playgrounds and kids and all that kind of stuff, as well as BHP's needs. So it's been pretty well vetted by staff in that they feel that this is what the city was always wanting to get here and what we are going to get here, and I can go through this in more detail if anyone wants. That north-south street is not really a street, just to point that out. There is a loading zone for, again, moving vans on the bottom left, but that is a fire emergency access and also an access to clean out stormwater maintenance, but that's all that's for. That's not a public street, so it's a walking path. Again, 4N, As Elaine mentioned, the idea is that it's co-housing or co-ops. And again, to your point, those are two different things. We've designed them as individualized units, but again, the inside of the building could morph around a little bit as long as the outside doesn't change. However, the northeast corner is a public community space. There's also a public community space that opens up onto that internal courtyard. So the idea is that that's the common living room, and then we have the common front door. So we did talk to co-housing developers. We think it works fundamentally for co-housing, but again, if someone were to buy it, they'd have to prove it. So this is the slide that's really exciting to me. You can see the scale of the hotel and the scale of the RTD housing up in the corner, and you can kind of picture, I probably should have widened it up, but you could picture Solana off to the right, or the Griffin, I guess it's now called. The scale that we're talking about here is completely different. And what it allowed for is Civitas, the landscape architect, and we to play with all these little cot spaces, John, the kind of ones that you're picking up on. They don't exist other places where you have the really big 300 by 300 foot buildings. So this has been, this slide, we were talking about it beforehand, we never show it because all it ever shows is roofs when you show the bird's eye. But in this particular case, it shows the permeability of the site. Form-based code was focused on this from the beginning, so we're excited that it's working out. Some renderings of each of these buildings. This is the southeast corner. Form-based code is really focused on making the southwest corner. Form-based code is really focused on making that first floor pedestrian experience different. And there's lots of requirements for how the windows work on the upper floors versus how the windows work in the commercial zone on the first floor. You can really see that datum in this rendering, that there's a big difference between what you experience when you walk along it and what you experience on the upper floors. We've listed some of these major requirements on the right. We've met every major requirement in terms of building length and mass and scale and all those things that demonstrate bulk, all the regulatory plans, frameworks for moving for pedestrians and cars and bikes. We've also met all of the ones for major materials, where the transparency is, where the stoops and entries for the buildings go, how roofs and parapets terminate, how those horizontal expression design lines work, even window articulations. Every window has to have a lintel. All of those things are met. Out of like 488 form-based code requirements, I think we've met all but 478 or something like that. So I think that's a reflection, a very positive reflection on a test form-based code.
I think you might want to say that again.
Transpose that.
Out of the 488
Sorry, out of the
requirements.
488, we've met, right, all but, yes, we've met 470, all but 10 or something. Yeah, right, we've met almost none of them. We're very proud of
Let the records show that there was laughter.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. So going north, one quick thing, architecturally, 1A and B, kind of as I mentioned before, we thought it was going to be one building. It's sort of pulled apart. So all of the outside of these buildings are really clad in brick. They're a bit more formal. That's what the form-based code contemplates. Along the major streets, you have this formality of the kind of expected civic material of brick and storefront and certain articulations of windows. When the buildings pull apart, that's where we went to another form-based code major material, the composite wood, and put that in there because it's a little more, I don't know, humanizing for a space that's caught and only pedestrians. It's not going to have any cars in it. So a little bit of a more informal space, a little more private space. So we're trying to tune the architecture as we go to these types of things. This is 1C. This is a very traditional building. Actually, there's a few contemporary nods, like pulling the jambs out for the windows, but it's all brick, very highly detailed. Again, storefront on the first floor where we have commercial, but where it transitions to residential, a little more privacy as it's contemplated in the form-based code. On the north side of the site, northeast corner, we have 3A and 3B. And remember, Spark is a little more contemporary. The Commons is a little more contemporary. So as we head north, we tried to get a little more fanciful, a little more contemporary with the expression, but all the building blocks are still there per form-based code. So you still have the base, you still have the horizontal expression, you still make the first floor, you still create openings in the buildings that are human scale. The townhomes by the park, remember this is a place where kids are supposed to play, maybe that's a little more family-oriented, so here we did go a little more fanciful, but still, the formalistic materials of brick, all of the requirements of form-based code are met. It's supposed to be a little more interesting, a little more material color change, a little different roofs, and trying to be a little more playful at that area. And then as we head further south, what could be a co-housing building, right up against the street, right across from the hotel, making Junction Place a major street. So again, a little more formality to that building, a little less playful, a little more of exactly what form-based code anticipates. Quick note on parking. We talked about it for the north parcel. This parking garage is the same. Again, you'll have a parking license, so it's fully applied some principle. You don't get a parking space. Once the parking lot drops below 75% occupation, it opens up to the whole district, and anyone can park in it at district set rates. So there's 91 official parking spaces in there. If it drops to, and I should be able to do this math in my head, but I can't, if it drops to 78 spaces or something like that, then anyone can park there for hourly or daily rates depending on how the district sets it up. We talked about the two parks. The two major parks required by form-based code are the two in the boxes. We've kind of gone through those a little bit. John, to answer your question about the trees and the materials, the trees along the street are all outside of the boundary of the parking garage. They're in full depth dirt, so we should get full-size street trees. There are some trees in that pocket park between the two buildings. They're in elevated planters, so we have the 18 inches plus the elevation. I think it's 2 feet for the planters. So while they won't grow huge, we've got 3.5 feet of planting, better than the 18 inches. But we were concerned about that as well. And then back to the exceptions, and this is really what I'll end on. Again, I think this is really one of the jobs that we've been talking about is trying to figure out how form-based code works. All of the exceptions that we have are really the result of either the program that we have not meshing very well with the form-based code, and there's only a couple of those. Most of them are the regulating plan and the underlying streets not matching the written form-based code perfectly. So for example, the transformer exception that Elaine mentioned, the transformers are supposed to be in alleys. This part of the form-based code, we don't have alleys, so we're required to ask for an exception. We are, the orange on the right-hand side of 1C and 1B, again, 150-foot building maximum length. The distance between the two streets is something like 170 feet or maybe a little more. We can't quite get to that 5 to 10-foot setback on both sides. So rather than making the building longer, which we thought was a more impactful exception, we pulled it away a little bit from the multi-use path because there's residential on that first floor. We thought giving them a bigger landscape buffer from a multi-use path made sense. All of the exceptions relating to the entrances that Elaine talked about and the building setbacks on the south and west side of Quadrant 1 are really a result of those being non-rectilinear property lines. So we're trying to do rectilinear buildings because anything besides that gets prohibitively expensive to build. So as the building jogs on that diagonal line, we have portions of the building on 1C that are slightly further away than the 5 to 10-foot maximum, but only for a little bit till the building comes back to the property line. We're having a similar problem on the corner where the overhangs are a little too deep in places, as Elaine kind of referenced, because again, we're trying to bring the building out to that property line where we can to make the street as it's contemplated in form-based code, but it's a square building and a triangular lot, so it gets a little complicated. I can go through the rest of the exceptions in as much detail as anybody wants. Elaine did a wonderful job, so I won't continue to waste time. So that's it, but I did have one other thing I wanted to say, which is this has been an extremely intensive effort. And I need to express on the record how indebted we are to staff and how incredibly hard they worked. They met with us every 2 weeks for a very long time. Elaine was putting in time. I was getting emails very late at night. And there's a deadline that we had to meet in order to get the money to build the affordable housing. And I am greatly appreciative of the entire team on everywhere that is making me look good being able to stand up here and say we did it. So thank you to everyone.
Great. All right, thanks, Bill, and good job bringing it in on time. And good job answering some of the questions that we had during our question and answer with staff. But there are probably some more questions for the applicant that the Planning Board has before we go to public comment. So who would like to start? Sarah?
I'll start, and it's really just about the windows. Because the change is universal to that area, could you just walk us through what the changes mean for either the look of the buildings or anything else?
The exception? Yep. So form-based code contemplates that windows are going to be in brick. And in all places where we have windows in brick, which is the vast majority of our elevations, all but really the elevations between 1A and 1B, those internal elevations, and I can flip over to that, and a few smaller places here and there, we are meeting that requirement that you have a 2-inch return. We actually have a much deeper than that. We have a 4-inch return. So you build the wood wall, put the window in the wood wall, put the brick outside of that, you get a nice deep shadow line. We looked at trying to do that with the wood, but what you end up having to do is space the wood off the framing by 3 inches or more and then return it back because the window sticks out a little bit, so you need a pretty big space on the wood. There's a couple of problems with that. One is pretty cost prohibitive. Maybe a bigger issue is that the venting of that becomes problematic, and the way we actually construct it, we're a little worried about water infiltration. So what we did instead was we put a little metal fin around the windows for the most part to try to essentially make a shadow box that sticks out. It's not exactly what the form-based code contemplates. We're trying to get to the intention, which is that windows, we talked about it with the person who wrote it. The concern was that the windows would be flat, and that glass is flat with no relief in the plane of the wall. And we've all seen that. It looks really cheap. So we're trying to create that depth. So we're doing it with an extruded piece, but it's in very limited spots in the project. And you can kind of see it between those two buildings. The white windows have this extruded, I mean, it's very small, I'm sorry, but it's got an extruded relief piece around it.
So it's not actually all the windows in the,
No, not at all. None of the public-facing windows fall into this category because all the street windows are brick. I believe that's true. I think that's, yeah, for everyone.
okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, anybody else? John? You have one?
Yeah, I
Go-
guess it's
Go for it.
the normal
Yeah,
procedure.
it's all right.
Yeah, so with respect again to the trees along the streets, and I appreciate the explanation of where the garage will be and where there's deep enough soil for significant trees. There were some comments from the city forester about the choice of which types of trees would be suitable. Do you agree with that, or what is the status of that?
Typically, the city forester wins. When the city landscape architect says what the plant species should be, that's what we give them. But that's typically handled, the final tree selections are handled in TechDoc. So we don't have any concerns whatsoever with meeting the tree species requirements. It's just done in the next stage.
Okay. And then also back to the paths and the public access. Along the very north boundary of the entire project here.
Yep.
You have that map shown in, yeah, right there.
Yep.
Is that intended to be public there, along that path?
That's interesting. Yes, and in the form-based code, you'll see that hatched area up there. That is an anticipated path. You're making a good point. That's not protected in a public access easement, I don't believe. So, but it is like any other development approval. It would be required to be maintained, and it is all paved. So it's supposed to be there for the public.
So it will not be fenced off.
And I'm sorry, are you referring to the one that's meandering through the park?
No, the one up along Goose Creek, I
gotcha.
think, yeah. So it's the one that we see coming through right here. So that is shown in the transportation master plan as a connection. So we are required, we drew it because, well, it was the right thing to do, and also because it was required to be there. It's in the, so there aren't any fences planned for it. It's planned to be open to the public.
Okay. So it will be a public access easement there.
I don't think it's a public access easement there, though.
Well, it's curious because the multi-use path that's shown in the form-based code is actually existing, but it's existing down
Oh,
below.
it's existing in Goose Creek?
Right, yeah, and that's the city-owned one.
Yeah, and so this is shown on this side of the property. I don't believe we had suggested there be a public access easement for that, but I'll defer to Hella on that.
We may have to look at that in TechDoc.
Well, let me just get the drawings up.
It's unclear from the maps as far as I could determine, so that's why I'm raising it here.
Right, and the challenge in the regulatory plan that you see there is you're not seeing on there a parallel multi-use path along Goose Creek, which exists today. So that's sort of the misunderstanding, if you will, but we'll double check the public access easement.
In the meantime, it is the intention of this approval, the way we've drawn it, to have that path along the north side. You can see on the right-hand side, the path continues all the way out to 30th Street.
That's right.
Yeah, so it's there. You're raising a good issue.
Okay, we'll talk about that later. But if, I'd just like to make the point that if the planning board determines that it's appropriate to have that, I think we need to make sure that that's an enforceable situation for the city.
Is that shown?
Then
John, before you move on,
Oh.
so I just want to be clear about this path we're talking about. There's already public access along the Goose Creek path, and we're talking about an additional parallel public access to the Goose Creek path, John?
That's right. I mean, that's what's shown in the maps there with the X's.
I don't know if that's intended.
It's at two different levels. The Goose Creek path is, 15 feet lower and than this path. And
I think the question that they're trying to answer is that east-west line intended to be the existing Goose Creek path, or is it intended to be a new path? And so they're looking through docs right now to...
My recollection, actually, when Boulder Housing Partners brought us the other quadrant, was that there's actually entrances to residences on that edge,
There are.
so they'd need a path.
Yeah, the path is shown. It's shown in the project plans, but the question is whether or not it would be required to be a public access easement, and I think we're double checking on that. So if there's other questions, we can come back to that.
Okay.
I'll let you continue in your line of questions. Peter's going to go next.
Okay, one more question, also having to do with public access, and that is that the road going into buildings
Let's see.
3A and 3B and that little public plaza there,
Yep.
or the plaza there, is the north-south, and you made the point in your presentation that that's not a public road.
Right. We met with Dave Lowry of Fire, and what he is asking for is removable bollards, so no one can drive there except for a fire truck. That would start on the left-hand side of that road. You can see the darker gray section, and then just to the north of that darker gray section, it starts with yellow landscaping. Those bollards would be at the back side of that darker gray section. That darker gray part is for van parking, for loading and unloading only. And then the rest of the road is only accessible if you have a key for the bollard.
Right. So would that be accessible to the public for pedestrian and bicycle use and so on?
It's an emergency access easement, so I believe that you can walk on that, yes.
Okay.
I mean, the intent is that that's all a walkable plaza.
I'm sure it's all walkable. Question is whether there's public access to it.
The easement that went to council, I'm almost certain, was the full T. Remember, the easement that we've just prepared for council is that cross shape, so that would memorialize that.
Okay, thank you.
Peter?
I don't know how this fits in. I wasn't on the board when we kind of dug through a lot of the form-based code originally, but the public sees buildings come up and they don't perceive the difference between who did what and where. No one really understands that 28th and Canyon was two different developers. So we've got Rev coming up across the street. How do these look together?
It's a good point. There's limited ability for us to really respond directly to Rev because we're bound by the form-based code.
Let me insert something so you can add to this. Form-based code better than almost anyone probably. Does form-based code have any place where that sort of self-awareness can be considered, because you starting to say you're bound by form-based code, sets me off to think that this form-based code is a bad idea. If
Yeah.
you're saying, hey, sorry, form-based code. So keep going. I just wanted to say that
Thank you for
you
the
can
warning.
do more than just say you're bound by form-based code.
Thanks for the warning. I was going, I will.
Thanks.
And I don't feel like it totally tied our hands. I think you saw as we went through the project that the different buildings were reacting in different ways to being in different places on the site. I also think it's important not to create 8 stamped buildings that all look the same. This isn't some development in the middle of eastern Colorado where some developer comes in and builds 20 acres of the same stuff. So every building was intended to be unique. And so within the form-based code, we were able to tweak things. And you saw that 1A and B, for example, are much more contemporary feeling. That was on purpose because of what's across the street. And it wasn't just Rev, it was also Google. There's a feeling that in our minds, I think that, and I'm being careful how I say this. The buildings directly to the south and the buildings to the southwest have kind of a more modern aesthetic, a little more technical aesthetic, and so we were trying to respond to that a little bit. We didn't consider the buildings to the southeast all that much because, and here's where I'm being careful, I just don't think there's a lot to respond to there. The form-based code really speaks to how you make a good street. It has a lot to do with what your sidewalks are, what your setbacks are from the sidewalk to the building, how the building makes the first floor, how your entries work, that you make a pedestrian cap, all of the things that you guys have heard me preach for years and years. So I do think in that regard, the form-based code drives an appropriate response across the street because you're making a good place that's next to a good place and it starts to form that outdoor room. So the best thing that we can do is be really good neighbors. So we try to respond to the aesthetic a bit, and then we try to be a really good public side of the street to help anchor it. Did we look at Rev and say, hey, they did this, we're going to do this plus B so that it feels like a twin? We didn't do that. One of the concerns was that the whole area felt too similar already, so we tried to create some different architecture with each building. So maybe contrasting a little bit.
Well, just to hear you say that, yes, you did consider it and look at it, because that is what we're going to experience as members of the public moving through this area, especially when we get Barnes & Noble to whatever it does. We're going to have now a full intersection.
Yeah, and to editorialize just briefly, the responsibility of trying to do a good job here weighed very heavily on us because this is going to have a major impact on the way the city views how successful this was. So this is all team members that don't have to be here. They worked on it. We're nervous about it. We tried to do the very best job we could, and we hope that it's going to be well received. So
It's exciting. Thank you.
Okay. No? Nothing? Okay.
I actually have
We'll let
one
Lupita
question.
speak first and then David.
Yes. I wanted to hear a little bit more about the lighting. I was kind of intrigued by the catenary lighting, and you mentioned in some parts, and I'm wondering if there's some specific thing you were trying to go for. Because it seemed initially in the park area, but I wonder if that's expanded around it. So if you can speak about it and what the purpose is, and safety and all of that.
sure, there's always a little bit of a push and pull between the dark skies ordinance and the perception of safety. So we have to, the whole thing has to be bound by, I think it's 2-foot candles at the property line. We can't exceed that. And then within the property, we can't exceed certain foot candle levels. And you can't see the fixture's bulb. It has to be a full cutoff, so you have to shroud it. Within the form-based code, the idea was that these paseos should be welcoming spaces. And I think that there's a concern, and there's a few places in Boulder, but mostly other places that I could reference, that they have these alleys and they feel unwelcoming, right? The buildings, the way building addresses it on the first floor isn't very nice. It's dark, it's tall. So the catenary lighting is actually part of the requirements, or in some cases, an encouraged response to the paseos. And I think the idea is at night, you've got this filtering light, you've got required form-based code entrances on the paseos, and the way the buildings, have transparency at the first floor. So the idea is that at night it starts to glow, both from the buildings and the light in the windows and from the light above, trying to make it a welcoming space. So that's the intention. And I think form-based code bakes it in pretty well. So we did try to augment it, but it's also within the code.
Okay, David?
This is another kind of form-based code question since we have the expert here. I looked through the form-based code. Usually when we get non-FBC site reviews, we see EcoPass for 3 years, EV charging stations in the parking lots and things like that. I assume that there are some of those requirements in FBC, but when I did a search for EcoPass, I didn't find that. So I was just curious if that's in there.
Good catch. Not in the FBC, but it is in the district. So the Boulder Junction Area District has 2 overlay taxing districts, one for parking and one for alternative transportation. And so in this case, if you want to, the parking requirements, I can't remember exactly, but there's a significant amount of parking requirement unless you opt into the district. If you opt into the district, then you can do the reduced parking, but then you're paying into Chris Hagelin and his team managing the entire transportation plan. And I would let staff get into that in more detail, but it's...
He actually nailed it. Okay. That's the absolutely correct regulatory response.
Not that I've lived this project at all for the last year. So all of those things are there. They're just done district-wide, not building by building.
It's a district thing rather than in the form-based code. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I figured it was somewhere because I couldn't imagine we would be putting all these folks right next to the transit village without EcoPasses.
And actually, so I met Chris Hagelin to do a tour out there a couple days ago, and I didn't know about this. He told me that there was a study that they did in 2017 that showed that the vehicular traffic coming out of Boulder Junction was 58% of what it would nationally be expected to be. So he felt that those methods were working, and he felt that they would work better as more of it gets infilled.
That's great. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.
So I have 2 separate questions. The first is actually about Building 1A and its entrance on the corner. My recollection from when BHP came with their initial proposal was that corner is a woofern, a wooner. Thank you, sorry.
Yeah.
And so I'm just curious if you could sort of walk us through what people will experience on that corner if they're a pedestrian.
I need better eyesight. So I'm going to refer you to the bottom right of this. Essentially, Pearl is sort of a double street there. So you've got the Pearl Street that exists right now, and then just to the north of it, you have a Woernerf, which is, it's a Dutch word for like multifunction. So the idea is there's a drop-off pickup thing for vehicles. So if it's actually perfect for like Uber and Lyft and dropping off pizzas or whatever else. But it's also a place for people to arrive by bicycle, people to meet rides and that kind of thing. But you still have, so coming directly out of the building, you still have a full 15, 20-foot sidewalk. Then you have a tree lawn. Then you have a paver street, and that's the Woernerf. So it has correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it has 1 layer of parking on it, and then it has one-way traffic heading only west, and it can be, the speed limits are very low, if there even is. I think it's essentially walking speed. So from a pedestrian on the sidewalk, it won't feel any different, but it will add a level of buffer between the sidewalk and the heavy Pearl Street traffic, which is does that answer the question?
Yeah, I was very confused about that street when the first project first came to us, so it just made me wonder what that interface was going to be like, and you're describing a lot of buffer for pedestrians.
Yeah, that's the intention. The idea is that what we don't have is people trying to stop on Pearl Street in a parallel parking and jump in and out quick. It's a much slower speed interface. So we've got the building, then we have pedestrians, then we have this pedestrian car slow interface zone, and then we have cars.
Thank you. And my other question is maybe for the landscape architect. I'm not sure. You sort of have a diagonal of parks, right? You have what will be the playground, then you have what will be the fire street, but is also a plaza, and then you have what is the plaza around the entrance to the garage, and then you have this other plaza between building 1B and 1C. And this is such an urban environment, and I'm just curious, are there any ways to green up those spaces so that the internal spaces to this neighborhood are less urban's the wrong word, but sort of less concrete?
Less paved.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm your landscape architect tonight because they couldn't come at the last second. I'm not a landscape architect, so that's kind of a problem. It's a good question. So I'll give you an example. The north-south street here is it's a vehicular fire access. Normally, that's supposed to be 20 feet wide, fully paved. We have the same concern. And so we were worried that people would come out of the back of their townhomes and it would just be a plaza, and that works fine if you're in Paris or something, but we're not Paris, so we want that natural stuff in there. So Dave Lowry worked with us to allow us to shrink that down, I think, to 12 feet, and then we can't plant trees, but we can plant tall grasses and flowering plants and things, so we get this buffer on both sides. We're not to tech dock yet. We're very cognizant of that. We're also worried about that. So I think as we go through Tech Doc, the idea is to reclaim, paving's fine, but you only want paving where people are actually walking. So I don't have a great answer for you, except for, yes, we're aware of that, and we do want to continue to push on it at Tech Doc.
So this is just a comment. So I bike that part of Goose Creek all the time.
Yep.
And I'm often making the curve down from what we're now called Junction Place. The turn west onto Goose Creek Path, it's a dangerous turn.
It is.
And I don't know whether there's some way to try to address that while you're doing the pocket park, or maybe I'm just passing this along to the city, but I've gotten almost run over several times, and I've probably almost run over people several times on bikes, so.
I walk there 3 times a week, and same exact experience. So unfortunately, because that's in a floodplain, we can't change it without a process, and the process is fairly substantial. So the timeline of getting the affordable up just doesn't allow for that. We did actually make parks aware of that, and I think that maybe, can you continue to pass it on?
And
We'll continue to pass it on, too. It is,
refinement at Tech Doc.
that left turn is,
Even if there's just a mirror, I mean, it's a pretty dangerous corner.
well, and you're right, it probably doesn't have a lot of attention right now because there's not a whole lot of people taking that path, but when you put 300 people up here, it'll change.
Right.
So maybe we can,
All right, well,
we'll bring it up again.
thank you.
Okay, does planning board have any more questions for the applicant?
Yes.
Nobody over in this side? Okay, John?
Yeah. I'm trying to look at this and figure out where the trash dumpsters and the trash pickup and how it's going to take place on this.
Yeah, that was,
Not obvious access to some of the buildings for that.
yeah, so we don't have any alleys, it sort of changes that, huh? That was a challenge for sure. And again, the form-based code actually speaks to trash yards and assumes that they're going to be off alleys. We don't have any alleys, so all the trash is in the garages. And we had to work with Western Disposal to figure out a plan that allows, and again, we have those 2 loading zones, so it allows the trash trucks to come up and will stage. So downstairs in the garage, there'll be little skid steers that pull the dumpsters up out of the garage and put them into Western Disposal, and they'll go back down. In a lot of ways, that's great, because we don't have any backs of houses, we don't have any dirty dumpsters or anything like that, but it is a management issue. And for example, BHP had to work pretty hard to find a way that was going to work with their management plan, but we were able to solve it. So all the trash is in the garages.
And
Oh, I'm sorry, except for 4S and 4N, the building 4s, they each have trash, I'll show you, sorry. They each have trash, there's a little gray connection, it's hard to see, but 4N has a little trash room that opens to that north-south street. So there's a little place where they can wheel it out, put it on the Western Disposal truck and wheel it back in, because there's no parking garage here.
so the truck itself doesn't need to go into the underground garage.
It can't, it won't fit.
Right.
Yeah.
So there'll be some labor associated with picking it up.
Yeah, and timing, because Western Disposal will give you a general 2 or 3 hour window, so there needs to be somebody, so it would be whoever's on site for maintenance would have to know that, hey, it's a Wednesday, it's 9 o'clock, truck's going to show up, and they have to be ready for it, and then bring the stuff out to them.
Okay.
There's other projects in Boulder that do that right now, and that's what Western pointed us to.
Okay,
It's been successful.
thank you.
Sure.
Okay, are we done with questions? one more, John?
Well, just wanted to see if staff had a chance to follow up on this north boundary issue that we.
So the regulatory plan shows a multi-use path on the northern end of the site. I think that is the Goose Creek path that was already constructed. And I think that must be within the city-owned Goose Creek area. The area around Goose Creek is actually owned by the city itself. And with that, they're meeting the regulatory requirement that exists to have a connection in that area.
Okay.
So the path at the higher level along the base of the building itself, which gives access to some of the units, is not necessarily...
It's not required to be a publicly accessible path.
But the applicant stated their intention to have it be that.
Yeah, I think it's supposed to be an open area that's not gated.
John, one thing on that point. So we have entries on the north side of 3A and entries on the north side of 2B, which is the Boulder Housing Partners units. So we couldn't gate it off without people losing, some buyer wouldn't be able to gate this without people losing access unless there was some sort of card key gate or something. So it's the intention to leave it open, but it also would be challenging from a functionality standpoint because people have to get on that path to get into their units.
Well, all right. Well, thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, if there are no further questions, I'd like to open it up to public comment right now. Do we have any members of the public who are signed up to speak? Okay, does any member of the public wish to speak? Okay, then I'm going to close the public comment on this matter, and let's begin to deliberate on this. So, Elaine, if you could put up the two questions that we're going to be talking about. I think in a way, the questions could be flipped, because if we believe that the exceptions can be met pursuant to the form-based code, then the proposal is consistent with the form-based code. And exceptions that are met are consistent with code. That's why we have exceptions in code. So we can do it either way. We can also kind of do a negative poll around the individual exceptions we could go through. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take time right now to address these questions and then turn it over to the next person who wants to speak. And what I'm going to say around key issue 1 is that when we went through the TVAP goals from 2007 around pedestrian and transit-oriented development, street and path connectivity, transit improvements, shared streets, addressing the jobs housing balance and providing for a lot of affordable housing, I was struck by how much it sounded like the exact same goals that we have today, 12 years later. And so it seemed to me that they must have been pretty prescient when they developed the TVAP. And this form-based code is meant to meet those goals, and it has made efforts to do so. And this project has made efforts within the form-based codes to meet all those requirements, and I think they've been met. And when I look at the exceptions, the semi-pervious pavers allowing below-grade parking is a pretty good trade. The build-to and corner build-to are small exceptions that allow other requirements to be met that were deemed to be more important. The build-to line on building 3A for the PSCO easement is the same exception we just approved a couple months ago on the phase 1 portion of this project. The building 1C transparency requirement is the same exception we granted in phase 1 because of the first floor residential component and the privacy needs at the back. The entryway configuration needs an exception, but the design meets the intent of creating recess. Same with the 2-inch recess for the windows, which is a pretty small exception given the small number of windows that it affects, and the fact that the fin creates the shadow line that's the intent of the recess. And then the transformer location exception is the same one we approved for the phase 1 buildings just a couple of months ago. So I think the fact that we're looking at 10 exceptions over 8 buildings, and most of them are either, most of them are ones we've already looked at, and we've already found were appropriate exceptions, and the other ones are either, good design trade-offs or necessary because of the parking garage being underground, says to me that this is not a big ask, and it's largely been built 478 out of 488 requirements to the form-based code. So, if I were the only person on planning board, I would negative poll myself and say, I have no issues with its consistency with the regulations of form-based code, and I have no issues with the requested exceptions. So now I'm going to turn it over and say, let's do a negative poll. Let's start with issue 2. Does anybody have any issues, or does anybody have, we'll just do a poll. Does anybody have any issues with any of the requested exceptions? Peter?
No.
No? Sarah? No? David? John? Lupita? Okay, so then the next question is, do we need to deliberate, or can we just call the question?
The point of form-based code. Let's do it.
Okay, so then I'm going to make a motion. And if we could get the motion language up, I'll just read it. Unless somebody else wants to make a motion.
No.
No? Okay.
Well,
I'll see if I can find it in my,
Right there.
It's there.
oh, okay. So I move that Planning Board approve form-based code review application number LUR 2019-0028, adopting the staff memorandum with attachments as findings of fact and subject to the conditions of approval recommended in the staff memorandum.
Second?
Then we've got a motion on the table. It's by Zuckerman and seconded by Ensign. Any discussion around the motion? Any friendly amendments to the motion? No, okay. Then the motion that I just stated is the motion of the board. I'm going to call the question. All in favor, say aye.
aye.
Aye. I think it passed 6-0. Thank you.
Right.
I don't like to talk as much about people.
You can make any speech you want right now. The floor is yours. Okay. I think, would people like to take a break right now? Like 10 minutes or so? Okay. So we're going to come back at 7:45.
Yeah, James, is that fast enough for you?
Oh, are you
Thanks, Bill.
collecting these?
Thank you.
hang out.
Seriously, like, chug it down.
You ready? Okay. We're back. So we're into matters from the planning board, planning director and city attorney. And the first one is an informational update. I believe James Hewitt is here, and it has to do with the Colorado Chautauqua Association and its sustainability and resilience strategy. So I'm going to turn it over to staff.
Thanks. Yeah, well, I'm here to talk to you a little bit, and I won't take too long, about this project that we've embarked upon with the CCR, the Colorado Chautauqua Association. And it's what the title indicates, in that there's a desire on the part of the city, which, of course, owns the land on which the buildings sit at Chautauqua. So it's really a big park. And also a historic district. It's been a historic district in Boulder since 1986, but it's a national historic landmark too, which is kind of a big deal because in the state there are, I think, 25 national historic landmarks and about 20,000 properties that are listed in the National Register of Historic Places. So it's a pretty rare level of designation, and it really recognizes the special and unusual character of the place. And it's really the last surviving Chautauqua, of which there were, I think there were 1,000 or more at one time around the country. And this is really the last one that's still functioning. There are a couple around that are still there, but they're not functioning as Chautauquas. So anyway, the genesis behind this idea was came from Chautauqua, actually, from the CCA, the Colorado Chautauqua Association, and their desire to create a really sustainable national historic landmark, a green place. In that way, they were hoping to, and still are, hoping to create a sort of their own microgrid up there, potentially, and also to plan for the fact that they are about as vulnerable as you can get in Boulder. And that is a result of the fact that three sides of that property are surrounded by open space and on that wilderness interface. So there are a number of issues that come along with that, as well as the very steep grade. So it is a pretty vulnerable place, and then also that almost all the buildings are just made out of wood frame. So obviously a number of issues there in terms of fire. So of course this is coming up as a result of climate change, and I'm sure I'm not telling you anything new here, but with a 1.5 centigrade increase in temperature, one of the predictions is that Boulder's climate will be like that of Albuquerque. So a high desert, very dry, and considerably hotter place than we have now. It's a little frightening to think of that, and gosh, I certainly hope it doesn't happen, but one of the ideas behind this project is to plan for such an eventuality or such eventualities, because the climate is changing. So, we in Boulder have done, I think, a pretty good job of rising to challenges and planning for the future. So this is in that spirit. So the goal of this project, which again is collaborative between the city and the CCA, is to identify vulnerabilities in sensitive historic resources while collaboratively developing a long-term plan for achieving sustainability and resilience at Chautauqua. And the strategy is intended to be a model of sustainable and resilient practices for the community and historic districts around the country. There's really only one instance of a strategic plan having been done so far for a historic district, and that was in Annapolis, Maryland, where, of course, flooding from tropical storms, hurricanes, and that sort of thing are one of the key vulnerabilities, which isn't what we have here. But we actually have on the team a person, a historic preservation professional who worked in Annapolis on that project. And we've also hired Resilient Analytics, which is a local firm headed by Paul Shanowski, who's also the head of the sustainability program at CU. So the project, this first phase of the project's broken into 3 pieces, and we're anticipating this will be finished by March of 2020. And right now, vulnerabilities and opportunities assessment is underway. That should be finished by the beginning of November, but of course, we're wanting to share the results and get input in terms of what the vulnerabilities are up there, but also what the opportunities might be in terms of making that place a self-sustainable microgrid, if that's appropriate. And that would be certainly a first for a historic district in the country. So how to do that sensitively and to take into consideration the special historic character of that place in terms of planning for, climate, large disaster scenarios, but also creating, again, a microgrid that would create a more resilient place. And the second piece of it would be aligning the goals. And the goals, when we say aligning the goals of CCA and the goals of the city. And I think one of the things that's interesting about Chautauqua is there are a lot of stakeholders there. And within the city, you've got open space, you've got parks and rec, you've got transportation, you've got utilities. So there are a number of different departments that are doing things up there. And coordinating those has been kind of tricky in the past. And CCA has been doing one thing, and sometimes Parks and Rec does something else. And then it's a historic district. So the communication sometimes hasn't been quite what it should be. So part of it is to coordinate the communication and have everybody heading in the same direction. So that will be the second part of the strategy, which will run from November until January. And then we're hoping to complete the strategy by March of 2020. And we will bring that strategy here to you for your review. As well, it'll go to the Open Space Mountain Parks Board, Parks and Rec, the Landmarks Board, and then ultimately City Council. So this first part would be the adoption of the strategy, and then the second phase would be implementation of that strategy, because it's a long-term strategy and one that probably would take place over 5, 10, perhaps 20 years. So as I mentioned, Resilient Analytics is working with us. We've hired them as a consultant, and CCA and the city are sharing the cost of that. Paul Chanowski's done a couple of presentations and started doing the analysis in terms of some of the observed vulnerabilities up there, which are drought, heat, drainage issues. What was identified too, which is pretty interesting, is that the infrastructure up there is somewhat antiquated, especially the power lines. They're really old, and I think that's true throughout Boulder. But up there, again, you've got really high winds, as high winds as you're going to get in the city, north-south running lines. And, we've seen problems with arcing in California and wildfires starting because of sparks. There are actually, and Paul has identified this, there are transformers on there that are circa 1920 transformers filled with oil. So this is something that I think needs to be addressed in the context of wind and heat and fire and that sort of thing. So Paul is with us going to be presenting in an open house on Tuesday, October 8th at Chautauqua. If you're interested in coming, I would invite you all to be there. The idea, again, is he's going to be presenting what he sees, what he's observed, and based upon the data, what some of the projections would be in terms of the vulnerabilities over the next 50 years or so. And getting input from people and people that use Chautauqua, because Chautauqua is a public place. The visitation through Chautauqua is estimated to be about 1 million people a year, which is has an impact on the place, certainly, as well as many other things. So that'll be the first open house.
James, do you know if, because the flyer says there's another one on November 15th, do you know if he'll be also presenting at that one, or?
Yes, and
that's the same thing.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. It's not on that flow chart. We decided to have a second for a couple of reasons, that we scheduled this one pretty quickly and didn't get enough time to really advertise, but also it's Yom Kippur, and so we thought it would be good to have a second open house for the vulnerabilities. So that will take place. What was the date you said? Was it November?
It's November 13th, Wednesday.
Thank you.
Because I'm going to miss next week. So
Okay.
Great, thanks.
Terrific. And then December 2nd, the options will be rolled out and we'll be receiving feedback. There's also a steering committee with members of the CCA and directors from Open Space and a number of other departments, and they're kind of vetting this project as well. And then the last open house will be February 18th, and that will be actually looking at the draft plan, which we then, after which we'll come to the planning board, the other boards, and the city council. If you want to visit the website, please do. We just got it up a few days ago, and it's providing a portal for the public to give their input, but also to keep everybody updated on what this project is about and what the schedule is. So that's it.
So, James, where's this plan, this strategy, if approved, going to live?
Well, it will live here with the city, and the city leases that land. The city leases the land to the Colorado Chautauqua and to the cottagers. So I would imagine that it would reside with the lease as a document, but I haven't thought about that. That's a pretty good question, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it affects us because if it's going to be in the comprehensive plan, sort of like a transit plan or other things that are adopted by reference into the comp plan, then, we're an approving body as well as city council. And if it is a standalone plan, then, you're asking for council to approve it, and we'll just make a recommendation. So just wanted to know where that was going to be.
Look to you all to make a recommendation as to where it might end up and where it might be referenced, and certainly the comprehensive plan, which I hadn't thought of, but that would make sense that it should be at least mentioned in there. Assuming that it's a good plan and it works out well.
Okay, thank you. Any
Anybody else have
questions?
Questions or
Comments?
concerns or, okay.
Well, I think it's a really, really neat project. And, with Santa Rosa fire caused by old arcing electric lines and issues that we're seeing with wildfire, and there's some steep slopes there, I think it's a great idea to have some protections in place for this treasure.
Yeah, and I think we're still pretty focused on flood because of the flood of 2013, but I think one of the really big vulnerabilities up there is wildfire and fire, which can happen so quickly. So figuring out ways to anticipate that and perhaps create breaks and protect buildings and the landscape itself in the event that might happen. So Yeah.
Great.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay, great. Give staff a minute to get set up for the next item, 6B, the East Boulder Subcommunity Plan Inventory and Analysis Update and Next Steps. And we've been provided a document for that.
For the haunted October rendition.
Okay, I think I'm ready when you are.
Okay, we're ready for you.
Great. Okay, I'm Kathleen King from Comprehensive Planning. Thanks for having me back tonight to talk about East Boulder. I'm really looking forward to hearing your feedback on our inventory report. So I'm going to go through a couple of topics tonight. I will quickly look back at our schedule and where we've been. I'll discuss what we've been working on for the past couple of months and share some of the results of our inventory work. And then we're going to talk about next steps for the project as we move forward and kind of towards the end of the year. So as a reminder, the East Boulder project kicked off this past February, and we spent the first couple of weeks establishing teams and a working group and creating a work plan that aligns with our community engagement commitments and list of deliverables. As this is the first project in kind of a reinvigorated program, we've tried to be really intentional about establishing precedent and kind of creating templates for future sub-community planning projects during that initial phase of work. And then we also launched into the inventory and analysis phase of work, and I'm going to present those results. To describe where we're at on the city's decision-making wheel, working towards the completion of the inventory and analysis phase of work brings us to stage 4, which is sharing a foundation of information and inquiry. Throughout the process so far, we've tried to create greater clarity around the purpose of sub-community planning, which is to implement the goals of the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan. In the East Boulder project, we've worked really hard to communicate this, and the work we've completed so far has been directly guided and informed by the goals of the BVCP. And I think that you'll see that in our approach to some of the technical work as well as the community engagement efforts. So that kind of brings us to what we're going to talk about tonight. I will present some of the work we've completed through engagement and inventory. And our questions for discussion tonight are, does the board agree with the key issues and conclusions of this draft inventory and analysis report? And does the board agree with the proposed next steps? So as a reminder about the area we're talking about, I just wanted to share this map. The East Boulder subcommunity includes land to the north of Arapahoe Avenue and kind of east of Foothills Parkway. It sort of jogs along Belmont there. These boundaries were updated and approved by council this past January. As we've discussed previously, that while the boundary lines help us focus on an area of study, we're not entirely limited by the red dotted line, and we do consider areas of impact and neighborhoods surrounding the subcommunity as part of this process. So our work in subcommunity planning is really directed by answering these 3 questions with the community. First, who is East Boulder? Next, what do you want to be? And then finally, how do we get there? The work we've done thus far is striving to answer that first question, and we've taken a 2-pronged approach to this. So we've conducted both a data-based inventory and have been developing an experience-based inventory, and I'm going to talk about each of these. First, the data-based inventory is really about the numbers. So what do we have in East Boulder today, and how much is there? We used a variety of sources to collect this information, including national resources like the census. We looked at some of our state resources like CDOT, State Demographer's Office, and then a lot of our local resources, including the city's in-house data catalog, as well as some of the internally generated reports. Departments across the city have collected a lot of great data on all kinds of topics, and that's been really useful in helping us paint a picture of East Boulder's existing conditions. But as we know, the data often doesn't represent sort of the whole picture. There's much more to a neighborhood and to a sub-community than just the numbers. So we've been developing kind of this catalog of experiences in addition to this. With project teams, working group members, and the community, we've walked different sites throughout East Boulder to document experiences of comfort or discomfort. We've ridden bikes and taken buses through the area to learn what it's like to travel in East Boulder. And we've met with local business owners and area workers to hear about their challenges and hopes for the future. Another way we've been collecting information about area experiences is through our working group. So we've established a 22-member East Boulder working group. 21 members of the community represent property owners, business owners, nearby homeowners, nearby renters, and area workers. And then we also have one member, John, who serves as our planning board liaison, and we've been very grateful to have him present at our meetings and participating. And I have to kind of say this group, the working group, has been awesome. They're just like, they're very dedicated, they're very motivated. They're having, I think, kind of critical conversations, and it feels like everybody's sort of working together. So that's been really nice to see and isn't always the case. So it's a great group. We've also collected experience-based information through a recent series of events. These events were hosted by working group members and city staff. So we went out in August to 9 different locations across the sub-community to ask people about their experiences in the area. This effort was really focused on going to where people are. So, for example, we went to the hospital cafeteria over lunch and talked to hospital employees and Ball Aerospace employees who use that cafeteria really frequently. We went to Valmont Bike Park during a Wednesday night race series, hung out at popular bus stops during rush hours. And the idea was to collect information directly from people that could be considered daily users of the area. So I think, you know, that kind of series of events, we learned a lot. Not only did it give our working group members opportunities to speak directly with kind of people that are the users of the site, but I think everyone that participated got to experience sort of different sites throughout the sub-community that maybe they don't visit that often. So that was kind of a great tactic that we haven't tried before and we'll probably try to use again. To open up the conversation beyond those events, we also hosted a series of questions on Be Heard Boulder, which allowed folks we didn't catch during our events, as well as community members from outside the sub-community, to share information and participate in the process. So I'm going to share what we learned from all of this next and kind of an attempt to combine our data-based inventory with the experience. So first, there's some quick numbers. The sub-community includes about 1,600 acres. There are 691 parcels in the area, only 466 residents, and almost 17,000 jobs. So for a bit of context, the area makes up about 10% of total area of the city, which kind of makes sense. We have 10 sub-communities, so it's 1/10 of the city. But what's interesting is that the number of parcels represents less than 2% of the number of properties, so the quantity of properties. So what that tells us is we have really large properties, large parcels in this area. And then also kind of fewer property owners making up the land area. The 466 residents is really just the population of San Lazaro, which is a mobile home community on the east side of the sub-community. And that site is actually located outside of the city boundaries in Boulder County. And I'll talk a little bit about that site later. And then the 17,000 jobs represent about 16% of jobs in the city. So as I think everyone knows, this area is a major employment center for the city. So as I mentioned earlier, the purpose of sub-community planning is to implement the goals of the BVCP. And so we've directed our inventory work to inform these goals and align with the 6 focus areas of the BVCP. So I'll present the goals and our findings for each of the focus areas. So we'll start with housing, affordability, and diversity. The major goals of this focus area are to increase the number of affordable units in the city and to increase the diversity of housing types. So kind of starting with the data, as I mentioned, there's only one residential area within the boundaries of the subcommunity, San Lazaro Park. The area includes 313 manufactured home sites in Boulder County. There are no other residential properties in the area today and no units in the permanently affordable housing program. These numbers are kind of striking compared to other subcommunities in the city, but they're not super surprising. The area was historically developed as an industrial area, and in the past, that type of land use was not really compatible with housing. But we know things are changing. During our engagement series, we asked folks if they would consider living in East Boulder. 61% of the people we spoke with in person indicated that yes, they would consider it. Many offered the caveat that the housing would have to be affordable to them. And then online, 38% said yes, they would consider living in East Boulder. 20% said maybe they would consider it, and 42% said no thanks. To provide a bit of insight into who participated in these efforts, the majority of people that we spoke with in East Boulder are not Boulder residents, but come to the subcommunity from Boulder County, Denver, or other surrounding areas. Whereas the majority of online participants through Be Heard Boulder do already live in Boulder today. The working group members wanted to make sure that I communicated very clearly that these questions were not distributed through a statistically valid survey and that participants volunteered their time and responses to the question, questions posed by the group. So the next focus area is balance of future jobs and housing. Major goals include adding housing in commercial industrial areas. The comp plan calls out East Boulder specifically related to this goal. And then to also increase access to multimodal transportation options. So as I mentioned earlier, lots of jobs in the area. There are 820 businesses located in East Boulder. This includes some major employers like Ball Aerospace, as well as many of the area's important small and local businesses. We have 887 acres zoned for industrial or commercial uses, so that's around half of the total area. And then related to getting all those people to their jobs and businesses, our colleagues in transportation found that 76% of the area's daily commuters are driving alone to work. That's pretty consistent with what we found through engagement, so most people are driving to East Boulder. So there's lots of room for improvement to meet some of the citywide goals on reducing the number of single occupant vehicles coming to the city. We've been working closely with transportation folks to collect information about transportation options, kind of the plans for the future, and are going to continue to work with them to identify solutions for this. Another issue to consider in the area is parking. So when asked about parking, the majority of people that we spoke with at Flatirons Business Park indicated there was enough parking, whereas most folks that we spoke to at the hospital believe there is not enough parking in the area. We did offer a third response to this question, which was, I believe there is too much car parking in East Boulder. No participants selected this response. But we did have a parking study conducted recently, and the consultant identified that there is actually an excess of parking in East Boulder. So definitely a topic that needs further kind of exploration. The next focus area is design quality and placemaking. Major goals include ensuring that redevelopment delivers high quality design for buildings and public spaces, and making sure that we are creating pedestrian-oriented neighborhoods. So one of the things that we consider when thinking about design quality and aesthetics is historic character. There are two historic landmarks in the subcommunity. One is a small white house on the south side of Valmont, and the other is a white kind of farmhouse structure. They're both located in Valmont City Park and not really connected to other areas of the subcommunity. So compared to other city landmarks or historic districts in the city, there really isn't kind of enough in this area to give it sort of a unified aesthetic character.
So I'm just curious, when you talk about historic landmarks, you're talking specifically about buildings that have already been landmarked?
That are designated.
So you're not, it's not actually let me ask it this way. Was there a survey done by landmark staff to identify potentially historic buildings?
No, there was not. But we do kind of see this sort of lack of consistency maybe as sort of an opportunity. It could provide a certain level of freedom and creativity, and we're going to work with community members moving forward to help define the character of the area so that future redevelopment may be in line with community expectations. And then related to the pedestrian-oriented neighborhoods, we looked at the walk access model developed as part of the pedestrian plan update to help evaluate the area. So I think you've seen a similar graphic to this when you reviewed the transportation master plan. This is part of the pedestrian master plan. East Boulder, the East Boulder subcommunity scored low or very low for walk access. And what I think is pretty great about this model is it considers both pedestrian facilities, so availability and quality of sidewalks, as well as availability of destinations. So in East Boulder, we've discovered we have a low rating for both of these. So the facilities aren't great, and even if they were, there's nowhere to really walk to.
Kathleen, while you have that slide up, is this one of those ArcGIS maps?
Yes.
That you mentioned in there? Okay. And that's something that is not generating maps that we see on any of the existing external websites right now. You're using it internally for pedestrian walkability and now things on East Boulder? Or is there?
We did generate this internally. The walk access map that is included as part of the pedestrian plan, I believe, is available online.
Okay. Yeah, but it said that you're there are opportunities to move to more mapping using that tool, so I was kind of curious.
Oh, yeah.
So,
yeah, definitely.
Okay, thanks.
So to sort of explore this idea further, the idea of destinations and access to destinations, we asked community members what kinds of destinations or businesses do they currently visit most often. Both in-person and online responses highlighted food and restaurants, as well as medical and health, and then auto services as top destinations. When asked what kinds of businesses people would like to see more of, the majority of responses described food and restaurants, and that's actually consistent with findings of the citywide retail study as well. We also asked participants about feelings of safety walking in the subcommunity. Most people who participated in person said yes, they do feel safe walking around, whereas online it was about half who indicated yes, and a third of participants indicated that feelings of safety depended on the time of day. That dependent on the time of day option wasn't available to in-person participants, but we did sort of hear this a lot, especially from workers at the big businesses just north of Arapahoe. They don't feel safe walking back to their cars at night, or they don't feel safe walking along Boulder Creek after dark. The next focus area is resilience and climate commitment. So major goals include achieving energy system resilience, improving community capacity and resilience to natural and economic disruptions, and reducing carbon emissions. So the East Boulder subcommunity is at the confluence of a lot of the city's major creeks, including Boulder and South Boulder Creek. 450 acres of land are in the high hazard and conveyance zones. And this is a great concern to many of our community members. We have heard from a lot of folks in the neighborhoods south of Arapahoe who experienced the 2013 floods, and incorporating flood mitigation and resilience planning into this project is extremely important to them. So we're definitely continuing to consider that moving forward. Another issue that we look at that can contribute to flood mitigation, but also air quality and energy use, is canopy coverage. So how much of an area is shaded by tree canopy? In East Boulder, we have less than 5% canopy coverage. The citywide urban forestry goal is 16%, so a lot of room for improvement here. And then something else that is unique, and I think it's kind of cool about East Boulder, is we have a concentration in this area of waste and recycling facilities. So EcoCycle, Resource, those are on the south side of Arapahoe, but also Western Disposal and Boulder County Recycling. So we're trying to think about how we can take advantage of this sort of concentration of those services and work with area businesses and potentially future residents to improve sustainability efforts and reduce waste. And then also related to resilience, this is a really important area of the city for emergency management. So Boulder County Sheriff's Office, Office of Emergency Management, and then the hospital and emergency room are all located in this subcommunity. So these are considered critical facilities to the entire city and important places to incorporate in future planning. So as I mentioned, sort of on the experiential side, we've heard a lot from community members concerning flood impacts and stormwater control. So I just kind of wanted to reiterate that we are hearing those concerns and we're taking them very seriously. The next focus area is about small local business, and the major goals are to support and retain small local businesses and to provide affordable business space in the city. So as I mentioned earlier, 820 businesses in East Boulder, and a lot of these businesses are I think, what really defines the area for community members. In February, we did a Valentine's Day campaign where we asked people what they love about East Boulder. An overwhelming majority of the responses describe some of the businesses that people love and really kind of cherish in the area. So we know that that's a defining characteristic. Related to affordable space, we're looking at a couple of different resources to better understand rates for renting space in the area. Listed here are some of the median rates for office, flex space, and industrial or warehouse space. While these rates today remain lower than rental rates in other subcommunities like Central Boulder or Crossroads, we've seen some significant increases since 2012, and this kind of experience of rate increases has been described by community members as well. The industrial and office space is really important to businesses in this area, but as I described, the rates have been increasing. It's a major topic taken on by the working group, and they've been having some really candid conversations about how to make improvements in the area without creating an environment that becomes unaffordable to the businesses who are there today. So we're continuing to explore that. The final focus area is surrounding arts and culture, and major goals including arts in the community benefit policies and supporting arts and cultural experiences as essential to well-being. So one of the things that we looked at in our city data was the availability of public art. So I think the city has around 100 pieces citywide across the city. 3 are located in East Boulder. There's 2 in Valmont City Park, and then 1 at an access point to the Boulder Creek Path. And then something else that's really fun we've sort of discovered through this process is that the subcommunity has a ton of arts and culture related businesses. Artist galleries, studios, performance venues, and places to learn about art are kind of clustered in sort of these pockets you see on the map up there. So we're thinking we have a really great opportunity to celebrate the work of these artists and find ways to expose some of this arts and culture to the rest of the city. When we asked people if they consider East Boulder a destination for arts and culture today, the majority of people we asked in person said yes. However, I should mention that we asked this question to folks attending a matinee at the Boulder Dinner Theater, so they really traveled there specifically for a cultural artistic event. But participants online, as you can see, do not consider East Boulder a destination for arts and culture. So I think, kind of knowing what we know now, we'll work with our colleagues in the Office of Arts and Culture to shift that perspective a bit. So all of this inventory work, as well as some of the other details included in the draft report, I think everybody has a copy. So the intention of the report is to really capture and document a holistic understanding of both the data and experiences of existing conditions in East Boulder today, as well as identify the ability and the capacity for the subcommunity to contribute to citywide goals of the comprehensive plan. What we found through this process is that East Boulder has the ability to make contributions to the goals in all of these focus areas. As we move forward into concept development and scenario testing, the challenge is going to be prioritizing where, how, and when we can make impacts on these goals. So the report's been out for the past 2 weeks, I think. We're collecting public comment to feed into the final report until October 11th. But we've gotten some initial feedback. One of the big topics that came out of a citywide staff review was that our report does not specifically address issues of equity. And so we're currently going back through the data to provide information about how some of the demographics in and surrounding the subcommunity align with issues of access and quality of life. And then we also shared the report with City Council on September 10th. And their feedback recommended that we include more information about surrounding neighborhoods in the report, and that in the future we look at doing a statistically valid survey as part of the engagement process for this project. So after collecting your feedback tonight and using the community input we receive, we will revise this report and provide the final document at the end of this month. At the end of August, we launched the concept development phase with the working group by brainstorming potential programs, policies, and projects that could help achieve our citywide goals. We're going to share those ideas with topic area specialists in the city and begin to collect more ideas about what this subcommunity wants to be in the future from community members. This phase of work, this kind of who do you want to be, is really sort of the heart, the meat of the project. And we're anticipating about a five-month schedule to complete that. So I can answer any questions you might have about the inventory, but at this time I'd love to get your feedback on the report. If there's anything you feel is really missing from what we've documented, or if there's things that you wish were included that you want to know about, I'd love to hear that. And then the main questions for the evening are really about, do you agree with the key issues and conclusions? And then do you agree with the proposed next steps?
Okay, well, thank you, Kathleen. It's a really beautiful draft from the cover to the last page, and a good presentation too, and lots of great information. It's a really fascinating document to look at. So I'm gonna just turn it over to John, who's got his hand up to start making comments.
Yeah, just as the planning board rep on some of these meetings, I just had some additional embroidery that I thought the board might be interested in. Not meant as discussion, but just to add to your very good presentation.
Sure.
First, I think I'd like to congratulate the staff. Holly and Alice and Ms. King have done a great job on this. They're enthusiastic and very good at keeping a nice atmosphere and keeping things moving in the team. And so congratulations for that. I think that's really worthwhile.
Thanks.
There are several issues that I think the board should be aware that this study will eventually address, and I think I want to bring them to your attention now because they have the potential to become a little bit controversial. One of them is to make sure you realize that the Boulder Airport is included in this area, and so the future of the airport itself may be a significant aspect of that this plan will have to deal with. There have been various comments made about devoting some of that land to housing and so on, ultimately. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. That
Could we, just a structure question, do we want to talk about those things as you go through them, or should we let you enumerate them? And because I have a number of questions on that.
Okay,
but
I'm happy either way. I'd just like to run through.
Yeah, run through them.
Minutes,
run through them, okay.
and then you can talk about
Sounds good, John. Go ahead.
So the future of the airport is going to be a big deal. The only residents in this area are those living in San Lazaro, which is actually not within the city limits, although they do receive city utilities, water and so on. And so I think potentially the future of San Lazaro and its status with respect to the city may be an element. Thirdly, the future of the Belmont power plant after it's closed is something that we should pay attention to. And also the consequences of various decisions on affordability of space for various businesses and studios and art-type activities are very relevant here. This is one of the areas where it's still affordable for auto firms and light industry and art studios to function. And based on the decisions we make, we'll have potentially a very significant impact on the affordability of that space. So I just wanted to bring those, to talk about that explicitly here, to make sure that we're paying attention to those factors in addition to what you just presented. So,
Great.
but I think you're doing a terrific job, and keep it up.
Thanks for that, John, and thanks for serving on the subcommittee.
Yeah, it's fun. You can recommend it.
Awesome. So, David?
I didn't know if you wanted to jump. I just was, it's not urgent, but thank you for bringing those up. And thank you for this wonderful plan. There were a lot of things in here that really resonated with me. And I'll probably have to loop back to cover some of them, but let me just ask, on those four things, actually, that was kind of a thematic question I had, because the San Lazaro question was sort of addressed fairly explicitly in a bullet item in there, I believe. At least it was in the preamble. I'm not sure if it was in this document. But some of the other ones didn't, I didn't get a sense that we are currently saying explicitly that they're in scope. And I did have a question about the airport, because I saw that the city currently owns 349 acres in the area. Does that include the airport?
Yes.
Okay. So that's almost half, right? It's like 136 acres or something like that, or 130, something like that?
I don't know if it's almost half. I think the largest kind of body of land owned by the city is Belmont City Park, which is pretty big.
Yeah.
But it might be the second.
Second biggest.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's big though.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I guess that's just kind of what kind of struck me, was that there was this sort of I knew in the back of my mind that there was all this, but there isn't that much explicit language in this version of the document that says that that might be in scope. So I don't know if I guess my feedback might be to at some point make it kind of more explicit if there's going to be a discussion about that, because that's a pretty interesting thing. Great. And then the power plant, I also am not sure I saw that addressed so much, but affordability I certainly did with the small business and stuff like that. So thank you, but thank you for, because I definitely had questions about those areas. For now, I can give up the floor.
Sure. Peter?
Someone who flies told me there's signs up at the airport alerting people that the airport is in danger. And I remember when John Putnam was chair, that came up often when this came up, because of his work in aviation. And I've heard many say that the airport is important to our business community, though I don't know much about flying or runway lengths, but I know the runway isn't long enough for a lot of planes. But what is the status of that?
So last week. The weeks are running together. Our September working group meeting actually took place at the airport. And we had Dennis Godfrey, who's the current airport manager, present issues of the airport master plan at that meeting. And then there were a number of tenants of the airport who came and spoke about their businesses and what they do there. We've also talked to colleagues in Community Vitality who have kind of provided us with a list of the extensive number and variety of types of businesses that use the airport. Certainly people that fly aircraft, but also aerial imagery businesses, climate businesses that use different types of LiDAR and things like that are all accessing the airport as a part of the operations of their business. So I think that that's definitely an important consideration. Related to changing uses at the airport, there is no plan or sort of directive that would happen in the near future. The airport master plan's next update is, I think, in 2025. So that might be an appropriate time. I know that there are restrictions on the types of uses that could take place there based on how the airport is funded. I don't know the intricacies of that, but the city receives federal and state funding to operate that space as an airport. And if we were to discontinue operations of the space as an airport, we would have to return that money. And I think in a recent response from transportation to a council member, that number is around $100 million.
So the answer, if public asks me as a volunteer member of the planning board, is the city going to close the airport? The answer is there are no plans to do so.
There are no plans to do so.
Okay.
Yeah.
If I may ask a question to follow up. So since you'll be having some discussions on site and also presumably with people related to the airport, were there any indication that in fact they would like to see additional resources for the airport? Was there anything that gave you a sense that maybe these potential changes happen or there are ways to enhance it? Was there a need for such thing? Was there any of that come up at all?
There wasn't any kind of description of kind of expansion of the airport or of airport services. The most recent change that has taken place is the airport has actually kind of on their southwestern corner of property that was owned by the airport, they have sold a chunk of that land and is now being developed for housing. I think there's 70 units going in there.
Is that Velo?
Excuse me?
Is that Velo?
Velo, I think so, yep. So they have housing and I think like a small market planned for that site.
Can I just follow up on that? Did they have to go, given that there's a master plan for the airport, what was the process by which that kind of development was approved?
I wasn't involved in that. I don't know if Jim, you know the history of that. Yeah.
Old crusty Brian Bone would probably know.
What was this development?
Velo. It's been around for a long time.
It's a business?
Trying to get off the ground. It's a development,
Townhomes.
townhome development.
That's not the one you reference in document. Under challenges, there was a 70 middle-income units neighborhood.
That's it.
That's Velo.
Yes.
Oh, I need to learn more about Velo. Okay.
Yeah, you're into biking. You totally should.
Do you have more?
I think with regards to that, I'm good. But I did want to ask just a little bit more about San Lázaro community, because there was one comment that something was not sufficient. And If you can maybe move back to that?
Sure.
Because that was the one bullet that mentioned something about them, and it was from the, the feedback that you got.
I'm not sure which one you're referencing.
That was before that, yeah.
Or? I think the bullet that lists San Lazaro specifically is up here, so housing affordability and diversity, this one.
Yeah, I think it was around that. But there was one with regards to actual feedback that when you said that there's something that we can improve from this. And I was wondering what the plans are moving forward, specific to this community.
So there's no plans. We're creating the plan now. What we know is this community is outside the city boundary today. We evaluated it against our policies for annexation, and the area is eligible for annexation based on I think it's 1.16 is our annexation policy in the comprehensive plan. Yeah, we have one of our working group members is a resident of San Lazaro, and we are through the month of October doing a series of engagements with students and parents of children in this community that attend Eisenhower Elementary, and then there's Eco Arts program that we've contracted with Growing Up Boulder, who's working with Eco Arts, who is going to help us engage folks in San Lazaro to get more information about what they're interested in seeing.
Just so that you know, we are actually also working, I'm just helping along, but
Yeah.
we're establishing more direct connections for that community.
Okay.
Some of through the Catholic Church here in Boulder. So we have an event coming up this Sunday, in fact.
Okay.
And the idea is to start getting more feedback directly from the community. So
Okay.
I know that a lot of the people who attend this parish are from the various enclaves, and San Lazaro is one of them.
Okay, great.
So if there's a way to kind of help along, we just established in this. In fact, this will be the first one with 2 of our council people.
Yeah.
So that you
Maybe
become
I could
aware of
follow
it.
up with you.
Yes,
after, 'cause
after that would be lovely.
We're always looking for better ways.
Yeah.
Okay, Peter?
So Flatiron Park, I know there's interest, or at least, let me back up. Have you talked to the owners of Flatiron Park about any interest they have in building housing there in Flatiron Park?
There's a couple of property owners. The major is Crescent Realty. A representative from Crescent Realty is on our working group, and they have expressed interest in housing in that area, but have also expressed feelings of constraint by the current zoning of that area.
Indeed. And I think I saw Ben on that.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because I think that there's an opportunity there with a creative owner who's really done some really neat things in that park. Who, if it's zoning, we're going to have zoning issues throughout East Boulder if we're going to install housing, correct?
Yeah, I think a big outcome of this plan will be some land use recommendations that will result in rezonings.
What is the Cordon Pharma facilities status? Fully operational and happy as they could be where they are?
They are fully operational. I don't
Nice
know
big
about
chunk.
their kind of
Okay.
plans for the future.
And how polluted is all the water around the power plant at this point?
I don't have the data about that. but given the historic use of that site, I think there is a assumption of significant contamination of both the land and potentially the water, but I don't know.
No, it's true. And it goes, I can just tell you, I've studied it. It goes beyond just the use of a cooling pond and for fly ash from the coal burning of the power plant back when it used to burn coal. Because there was, the Valmont Butte was used for processing of all kinds of ore for 100 years or more before. So there's got to be heavy metals in there too. Sarah?
Can I have a bunch of things I want to say, but I just want to make sure I'm understanding our process. Because this isn't, we're not having a hearing on an ordinance, we can just flow back and forth?
Yeah, I don't want to flow back and forth too much more. I mean, right now what we've been doing is kind of giving our general impressions, but I'd really like to get it back to that slide where, you know, you're asking for our input in those two areas. So if people feel like they've asked enough questions and made enough general comments, maybe we can focus up. If there are any more general questions or comments, maybe just get them out now.
No, I'll be able to raise them when I get to the ideas or thoughts I want to put out there.
Okay, then I just want to ask a question, which is this inventory and analysis report, it doesn't have a precedent for any of the other sub-community plans, does it?
So the only other thing is North Boulder, and
Right.
there is not a kind of companion document.
So is this kind of a new concept? Let's go out and get the data and get people's impressions and kind of get what the use patterns are and learn about the community first before we start making recommendations. So this is that.
This is that, yeah.
Okay. Great. So can we put that slide back up and you can get more focused feedback from us? Okay, who'd like to start?
Can I start?
Sure.
Okay.
Sarah.
So I will try not to monopolize, and I'll wait for things to come back, but I have a bunch of things I would like to at least put on the table. I'll start with, okay, so the balance of future jobs and housing. I was struck as I was reading the report, which was fascinating. It was so interesting to read. Thank you very much. Is the challenge of, or the perhaps unintended consequence of Boulder continuing to focus to continue its role as a regional economic hub, insofar as it sets us up for a very dense Boulder and a lot of in-commuters from what are essentially more residential communities around us. This seems to me like very 1970s thinking, and I'm just concerned. I just want to put that on the table because it strikes me that some of the thinking around the East Boulder planning process further embeds us in that kind of thinking. I just want to urge the working group to look at this as an opportunity to maybe think more regionally about economic development. Like how might we use this huge swath of land that we're planning to think about where there might be opportunities instead of bringing all the businesses, not all, but many of the businesses to East Boulder or elsewhere in Boulder. And then also trying to house the people who commute in, and instead maybe thinking more creatively about a better balance of where economic growth happens. That's my first one. Go around.
Okay. Anybody? Who's next? Or should we go around? Peter, you want to go next? Okay. Lupita?
In the chart where you showed essentially the reversal in terms of the responses that you got from in person versus online, I'm wondering what the difference in the demographics were. If there were actual workers that they don't think they would like to live in that area, or the people who don't work there but they would like to be. was there any feedback, any other questions regarding to that you can kind of dig in a little bit better in terms of what demographics were in favor versus those who were not?
So we did not explicitly ask demographic questions at the in-person events, just based on kind of the limit of time. We were trying to get as many people to participate as we could, and so the questionnaire was short. The question that we did ask everyone was, do you live in Boulder? If not, where? And how did you get here today? So did you drive, ride a bike, et cetera? Related, were you talking, there was one that was totally opposite, and that was the arts and culture one?
That was just silly.
Sure, but it was interesting being at the Boulder Dinner Theater. Every person we spoke to was from outside of Boulder, and people were coming from really far away, like Colorado Springs and Black Hawk, and really traveling to attend an event there. So that was kind of interesting. Related to the housing, I don't have sort of the correlation of that hard data, but just from my experience of talking to people, there were a lot of people, particularly in Flatiron Park, who were maybe kind of younger professional. Yes, I would love to live in Boulder. I can't afford it. It'd be great to be able to walk here. Yes, yes, I'm interested in living in East Boulder. Whereas sort of the demographics of folks that we spoke to at the hospital, for instance, were already Boulder residents. And when asked, would you live in East Boulder? They're saying, no, I live on the west side of town. It's way nicer. I'm not interested in moving. I love my house. And that was kind of the age of that population skewed higher.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to get at, because maybe these are people who can afford living closer, and also they're already established, versus the people who are really trying to get in will be willing to live in that area. So I think that in terms of those who already are here, they don't need to move outward, versus to those who are not even here could come in, and that may be a good, desirable location.
That's right.
Okay.
I think so. That's kind of the one-on-one impression that I got from all.
And you did have some information. I said demographics, in terms, even age-wise, right? So you do have some information about that, like the younger professionals.
No, that
you
was
kind of
just
like
from
being there.
looking at them.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
Yeah.
So did you want to respond to the first question? Lupita, did you want to respond to the first question? Do you agree with the key issues and conclusions?
I feel that I still need a little more info, frankly,
Okay.
for my perspective.
Okay. So your mic was off. She said she feels like she needs more info for her perspective. So,
I apologize. Yes, I do. I will prefer more information.
okay, so let's keep going. John?
Well, it's a little bit unfair. I guess I get to have my chance at the apple here and also at our meetings of the group. I think that so far this has been great work. I'm not sure that I think that the key issues that have been identified, that I agree with them completely. I laid out some of the ones that earlier tonight that I think should be addressed explicitly. And I still feel that way. I think I'm also very cautious about the use of the survey data that you provided. I think that is interesting, and it's obviously appropriate to collect it. But as far as drawing any conclusions from it, I think I have the same comment as somebody else who wanted statistically valid surveys. I'm very cautious about, for example, asking people who show up at a dinner theater performance, what they think about East Boulder when they come from Black Hawk or Colorado Springs.
Sure.
It's interesting to hear what they think, but I don't think they're the public that we are trying to reach in this and get information from. So anyway, that's just a general comment, and I'm aware that statistically accurate surveys are difficult and expensive to run, but I don't see that it's appropriate to use these kind of surveys on their own to develop conclusions about how we move ahead.
Shall I go? All right. So on the question, does the board agree with the key issues and conclusions of the draft inventory analysis report? Well, I was just really excited to see this area get some attention. I've had an office out on Airport Road for a while, and one of the things that really resonated with me was talking about better transportation alternatives for East Boulder. When I was out on that loop on Airport Road, you have to walk a mile to get to the nearest bus stop on Valmont. So that's a pretty hefty lift to get people to use mass transit. Bike connectivity has gotten a lot better with Valmont Bike Park, and there's the possibility of biking along the path if we can ever get the bridges.
Like one little segment.
One little thing. Yeah. But yeah, so I think that'll be really good to get some strong recommendations from the working group. I'd love to think that additional housing opportunities at the municipal airport could really increase the pressure to have good transport out to that area and make it a win-win in many respects. I understand the challenges with approaching the airport issue in a working group like this. And I also understand that working group members sometimes get all excited about the amount of impact they can make, and then there's just a lot of other moving parts, and it can be a little bit disheartening. So I can understand being a little bit careful in moving into that area. But there are key questions we're asking ourselves as a city that really fit nicely into the working group, and one of them is, and I don't necessarily think that it needs to be drawn out as its own issue. It can be put into the affordable housing issue, because it sort of helps address that, right? So look at it in that context and with that prism. But at some point, it may take some willpower to ask ourselves whether those few loud voices who are so excited about having an airport within our city limits are the voices that should win the day. The next update to that master plan, I think, is in 2024. So yeah, it's about 5 years away. So maybe the working group could have some recommendations that would kind of help, even if it doesn't happen in the working group timeframe. And then just to reiterate, I felt, in the area of housing and light industrial, I really love that a lot of the wording that was presented here. When I got to the end, I got to the sentence that says, working with the community to identify these sites will be a key component of future phases of work. That's in it. And I thought, well, yes, but I think there's a lot more to it than that when it comes to housing and light industrial, and you identified that earlier, the possibility of pollutants or smells or various things. So I think it's going to take, saying community makes me feel like, well, it's just a matter of us all in Boulder saying something, but I think it's going to, some of those things like changes to the use tables and land use issues are going to require certain experts to come in and work with the working group and kind of help guide the process, right? And I saw that, and I saw that too in the list of all the names of people involved. I think one of the not filled staff positions was actually the person who's going to create a lot of those subject matter expert liaisons. So I think that's going to be really key as you start to plan out deep dives into some of these areas, is to do a lot of background work to help the working group along, because they're not going to know how use tables work and how zoning works in great detail. So help them kind of metabolize that to see how that can inform the output of the working group. So I felt, I think that kind of that overarching thing with that and the airport is I'd love to see a little more punch. I can understand why they're being embedded into the other priorities, but anywhere where we can start to make it a little more explicit that some of these things might be on the table and this is what you might see as recommendations out of the group would be useful. So let's see, I think those were the key 2 or 3 areas I wanted to cover.
Great, thanks,
Thank you.
David. So I can say that I agree with the key issues and conclusions in the report. And then some more commentary on that is, there's a part of me that feels like, in this area where it's one of the only areas left in Boulder where people can afford to run businesses that don't throw off huge numbers of dollars per square foot to pay the rent. Consequently, there's actually art and innovation going on out there. Maybe the best thing to do with it is not plan it at all. It seems to be working in a way that that is unusual in Boulder, and some of it's just due to low property values, and that might be a blessing that we shouldn't just look at as some happenstance, and we should try to actually, continue to allow that to occur. That said, I said I did agree with all these key issues and the conclusions, and so things like giving people a chance to work where they live and live where they work and reduce carbon footprint and stuff, those main goals, 11 or 12 goals you have in the back are important goals. And so going back to 2.21 light industrial areas, which is a policy that the planning board worked pretty hard on in the comprehensive plan update, our vision was there are places that are really actually ideal for residential infill along bike paths and on the kind of the outer edges of the big industrial blocks, but that these additional housing projects should go, next to, on top of, but never at the expense and never be allowed to be conversions of industrial space, because we still need a place in Boulder, like John said, where you can, get your car worked on. And then when we were hearing a project that was coming forward in front of us, there was I can't remember exactly what it was, but we were looking at the use table and we were looking at the intensity table, and IM allowed for one floor area ratio and IG allowed for another, and one was 0.45 and the other was 0.55. And so, we were looking at it and thinking, well, there's probably not a heck of a lot of difference between IM and IG, the industrial manufacturing, industrial general. And why do we have this difference in floor area? And as I was thinking about the applicant and about the kinds of uses that were in the area, it dawned on me that we hadn't cast the net wide enough in policy 2.21, that there aren't really a lot of smokestack industries that are loud or, really noxious in Boulder. And we should have probably struck the word light and just said industrial areas for 2.21, that almost all of the industrial districts around Boulder, there's a ton of office space and stuff that just isn't really that noxious and would be compatible with housing. So, to the extent that that I would support planning for this, kind of magical area in Boulder where art happens and innovation is possible, and people with, less than $100 a square foot to pay for rent can find a location. I think if there's some way that we can, without amending the actual comprehensive plan, where we can open the door to that kind of housing infill in the other industrial zones as well, it would be really good.
All right, so to answer the question, yes, I generally agree, and I have the following comments, and since everyone's just given all their comments, I will do the same. In addition to the one I already gave, in terms of future jobs, housing balance, this actually is a reference, it refers in part to what Harmon just spoke about. I think we've, the report thus far talks about half of the challenge of housing in an industrial area, and I think we need to talk about the other half with regards to protecting the remaining industrial areas. And we have to take into account, or this process has to take into account, the financial consequences of adding residential zoning or residential building in industrial areas. While the noise and smells are a challenge, so is the increase in land value when you start to build residential versus industrial. And you're going to change, you're going to actually, I think you need to, I think the working group and the staff and the city really need to think very, very carefully about the economic implications of adding the more expensive, I'm not saying they shouldn't, but you just have to take that into account and really do a lot of economic forecasting in order to protect these currently affordable industrial areas. And I actually had written here, I urge a focus on sites like the airport where we already own it and it's industrial, but sort of not. But I think it's an area that I'll echo what David said about maybe this is something that the working group can tee up for the 2024 master plan. Another area, resilience and climate commitment. I was really struck in the report about the natural resources in this area.
Yeah.
And I realized that they are, so many of them are degraded, but they're also pretty significant.
Yeah.
And I was taken with the fact that Appendix G sort of incorporates those natural resources in a very utilitarian way. That how will they help us with resilience and climate commitments? And I didn't see a specific indication that the working group looks at these natural resources and thinks about preservation, enhancement, or restoration. And it strikes me that if we're going to really think long and hard about East Boulder becoming a more mixed community with some residential place where more folks would like to live, we should really be trying to find a better balance in how the working group and the city thinks about the restoration, enhancement of those natural resources. I, for one, used to walk dogs at the Humane Society, and I always walked along the path, and it was such a beautiful area, but it was not given a whole lot of attention. Another item, I really think there's a value in asking landmark staff to actually survey potentially landmarkable locations and buildings in that area.
Okay.
Because if you don't do it before, it's just gonna show up after and become something of a challenge. And then the waste and recycling services in the area, it actually reminded me of a conversation I had recently with someone about composting. And if I understand it correctly, the city currently sends its composting out to a facility that's way, way, way out of town. And it's someone who does an amazing job. But there has been, or there is, the start of a conversation about what could the city do to deal with its own composting issues. And maybe this is, as long as we've got all these waste and recycling facilities in the same place or near each other, that is something that could also be considered. And then my final item, with regards to the diversity of housing types, and I know in the report you say, we'll get to that later, which I understand, but I would like to just plant my flag here to urge you to incorporate into your considerations of housing diversity the data we do have from the 2014 in-commuter survey and the 2015 missing middle survey, the housing types indicated from those two surveys, which were for single-family homes, townhomes, duplexes, maybe triplexes with yards and the opportunity to buy, should be part of the conversation, because I think the development community may want to build one kind of thing, which is great, but to get the people who work at 55th and Arapahoe, but live east, may not want to live in the thing that developers want to build. So really thinking through what those stated the stated desires are that might actually get at least some portion of folks who work outside of the city but are of the 18,000 people who basically commute in every day.
Yeah.
And those were all of my thoughts.
Thank you.
Peter, you passed?
Yeah, so I agree with the key issues, and I don't know about the conclusions yet. I do think that the longer view of what's going to constitute industrial, I liked Harmon's point that the smokestack businesses aren't here anymore. I also think that some among us, and I know Harmon's an old car guy at heart and romanticizes the idea of Greasy Joe's place to go get his transmission fixed, or he can talk about the big game or how the Dodgers are doing or something. But electric cars have a lot fewer parts. They require a totally different sort of mechanic situation. And if we're going to be thinking out 10, 15, 20 years, a lot of things are going to be changing in our decarbonized environment. And what passes for industrial now won't be the same. So I want to make sure we're forward thinking about this, and also opening the doors to the younger generation of makers who are returning to this idea of doing things with their hands that can be a really great business for Boulder in terms of us exporting goods and know-how. And this is one of the last places we've got great tech businesses, but there are people who are making things like Truman Boot in this area with their hands, and they need those places too, and they're different than what you need, and they're not as smelly necessarily, and they can be adjacent to or underneath excuse me, housing. So I see a beautiful area with some really nice waterways and open space and an opportunity for a different kind of Boulder that, as beautiful as what we saw from 30th and Pearl, I think we all know what we're seeing there is the thing that gets approved in Boulder, which looks, no one's gonna really go visit Boulder and say that the buildings they're seeing in Boulder are amazing. So by dear God, let's not do more of that here. We actually have a chance to do some fun, funky, cool stuff that's gonna make this a, I'm sick of the word rhino, but the point is, there's something we can do here that would be different than what Boulder has. And it's a great opportunity.
I will say the one kind of word that keeps coming up from the working group that they appreciate and want to make sure this aesthetic character kind of stays is gritty and grit. They like that feel of the place. And so we're definitely thinking about
Yeah,
kind of the funky
keep it
grittiness.
gritty and funky, but make it easier to get around.
Right.
And make it workable. I love getting lost over there. My wife works at the JCC now, and my other kid goes to Horizons, and so I'm out in East Boulder a lot. I also pick up paint at the Hazardous Waste Center for projects, and I love getting lost over there. There's some great opportunities to do some cool things there, so keep it up.
Yeah.
Thank you for tackling this.
Okay, has everybody spoken to issue number 1 that wants to? All right, then let's go to 2. Who wants to start with, does the board agree with the proposed next steps?
I will. So basically, yes. I do sense the value of engaging more residents from nearby residential areas, since they will be affected, and that includes the folks who live in San Lazaro, but also, and you listed Vista Villages, Cherryvale, Sombrero Ranch, and Arapahoe Ridge, and Columbine Mobile Home Park. And then, maybe this should not have gone into this one, but will the fast tracks have a stop there?
So the planned stop, I think, is at 63rd.
Okay. Because I just wonder if there's any value in starting a conversation with whoever the powers that be are with regards to fast track about us having, instead of having a stop that's actually closer to the 55th and Arapahoe station mass area where you all are doing a master plan and thinking about some sort of connective pedestrian thing that could tie together the hoped-for fast tracks and these multiple buses that we're trying to coalesce into to meet in a single location, or to stop in a single location. It could end up being a really, conceivably, a center that might be interesting.
Yeah.
That was it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next. Anybody want to go next?
I'll go. I felt like the next steps look good. And I was just going to say, if you want us to look at any stages of it, I know that the concept plan, clearly there's a lot of excitement about in this room, so I don't know if we can fit it in before the December view of the concept plan by City Council, but might be something that we could take a look at and kind of help identify some additional things that might make it more interesting to council or whatever. So, but
Since I wrote this memo, that date and schedule sounds like it is likely changing. But I can provide kind of an update on that.
Yeah.
Certainly, yeah. When we have some concepts to react to, we'll bring them to the planning board.
Yeah, but I thought next steps look great, and continuing to refine the scope as it goes along, and be more explicit about some of the foreseen deliverables will be really useful. It looks really good.
Let's go down the line then, John.
I think they're good. I think what we, and I say we, considering I expect to continue to participate, I think we should seek to get more participation, as Sarah mentioned, from Vista Village area, given that they have as much involvement here and they come out to the airport road and deal with what we're doing as anybody.
Yeah.
So I'd like to see more participation of the surrounding residents, but we've already talked about that, so I won't push it here.
Thank you. Lupita.
I would be interested in finding out if there is something that can be more focused regarding potential remediation of any potential environmental issues in that area. So it was brought up. I don't know much details, but it does make sense that we get to know more about what needs to be done, because then presumably based on what we find out, there will be more maybe variety of uses for the spaces. I'm thinking that maybe this is also an opportunity to find ways to maybe reach out to university. There's a strong group of people that potentially can look into contamination, and even, at least in the School of Engineering, students do capstone projects. And environmental engineering, for sure, they have looked at cases and they work on a project specific to some sort of site and make recommendations. This could be a good for case studies for students to work on, and you could have some potentially free labor and really build connections with the university and engage the students to feel part of the city. So if there's something that can be done, I would love to have to, kind of lead you to some of those people.
Great, thank you.
The Chris Hess from Mondo Robot, I don't know if you talked with him. It's a ad shop over there in Conestoga by Black Belly.
Okay.
He has a teasing joke that's kind of serious, that they want to put together a brand for this area called Beast, Boulder East.
Okay.
And whether or not they go with that or not, you could harness their energy and ability to really lift this up and make it a brand. Because a lot of businesses are moving out there now because they can't make it work in Boulder anymore. And they're creative businesses that aren't usually there.
There's, so we've been, I didn't mention it in the presentation, but we've been putting together these videos called Sub-Community Stories, where we sort of interview business owners in the area about sort of their hopes and dreams and challenges of either living or working there. And so the most recent one, which is up on the project website right now, is an interview with Hosea Rosenberg, who owns Black Belly. And he mentions that he and his friends have like a East Boulder sign. And so he was saying it's East Boulder strong or East Boulder proud or something like that. So yeah. It'd be cool.
Yeah, same community. Go for it.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess I'm last. So, back to the sort of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Don't try to make a new plan and mess up the magic. One thing that you could say is that we could do an inventory analysis report on every one of the subcommunities without actually necessarily turning them into subcommunity plans and then having them adopted as part of the comprehensive plan. And particularly in a neighborhood that only has 466 residents, maybe this one doesn't need to happen. If we thought that the single most sort of contra to the comprehensive plan aspect of the subcommunity was its jobs, housing imbalance, and its simple lack of affordable housing, lack of housing in general, there's a pretty robust planning process around changes to the use table. And you could imagine a change to the use table where, you provide that you can add housing to an industrial lot, provided that it goes through some form of use review. No additional housing is allowed at the expense of 1 square foot of industrial space. In other words, no replacement of industrial space. No housing that is, not affordable to somebody making over 110% of AMI is allowed. It all has to be deed restricted if you want to try to promote only housing for workers and not drastically increase the value of the land in that area. You just make it so the housing projects can't be terribly profitable for the developers because they have to keep their costs down and serve, a middle-class clientele once they're built. So, there's a part of me that says I'd like to just see, the infill stuff done through the use table and just say, great, the inventory and analysis report served the purpose. We learned everything we needed to know about this neighborhood for now. It's doing great, and it's kind of the cradle of innovation for Boulder. Let's not mess with it. So, that's one way of handling it. And then, you do your next inventory and analysis report on Southeast Boulder, a different neighborhood, and potentially do a subcommunity plan, make it go to that next level. But, and that's not to discount any of this work. I think this is really superb. And it's just that sometimes, you got to stop for a second and ask the question of, do we need to go any further? If we do more subcommunity planning like work for this, then I agree with the proposed next steps. And I think the community outreach and engagement that staff is doing these days is admirable and as complete as it is in any other community in the country. And you can't sit and interview every single person in the neighborhood for 1 hour each or something. It just doesn't work that way. I think the community outreach is adequate. And if we're going to do something around the environmental remediation piece that Lupita mentioned, even though most of the areas that could really use remediation are actually east of the East Boulder subcommunity plan area, and they're not included in the subcommunity plan area. One thing I want to point out is that on page 12 in that awesome historical two-plate picture that you have of this resort advertisement for some Valmont resort way out there with the Valmont Butte sticking up on the right. You can see at the bottom right next to the Valmont Butte, you can see there's a teepee there. And so the Valmont Butte was actually a sacred site for the Arapaho, and they can't really use it for any kind of ceremonial purposes because of the contamination and the way that it's gated and fenced off. It's also an important cultural site for the Valmont Cemetery, and one of the early Colorado settlements of Valmont has its cemetery up there on the Butte. And so, to the extent that we're trying to be inclusive and do environmental remediation, I think those groups ought to be part of it. Anybody else want to make any comments?
So can I just inquire to make sure that I understand your point? Are you saying that you don't really think that it's necessary to proceed with the sub-community plan here?
Well, I think part of the question is...
Did I misunderstand?
No, I'm saying it might not be. Because things that work in the world of planning sometimes work because of reasons that even planners can't figure out. They just happen. There's architects make magic, sometimes intentionally and sometimes unintentionally, and buildings become beloved for the weirdest reasons, and parks that don't look like they're very inviting become favorites for lunchtime activities, and parks that are soft and have wonderful features in them sometimes just look too pretty and nobody spends any quality time there. So when you have a neighborhood where things are happening, where there's clearly a character, and the people who are doing neat stuff in Boulder are focusing on their efforts on that neighborhood, the planner in me sometimes has to question, do we touch it? And there are 10 subcommunities, and we have one outdated subcommunity plan in the North Boulder subcommunity plan, which was done years ago. And so to go from inventory and analysis to, well, now that we've done it, we have to do a subcommunity plan, when there are basically 9 other subcommunities that could use a subcommunity plan, or at least consideration thereof, says to me, maybe start doing a couple more inventory and analysis reports and see which one jumps out as really needing some planning.
Well, if I can just, I understand you're talking to the public, but I can't resist just responding. I think it's true, we have a very nice situation there, but things change. And the reason for a subcommunity plan is to try and make sure they're changing in a way that we want them to, and to encourage, to decide what we want, and to do what we can to make sure we achieve what we want. And that's the reason, in my opinion, to move ahead with the efforts that we have going on now. So I'm unwilling to just let things go and happen without any attempt to guide them. And so I think we should be moving ahead with this plan.
Okay, noted. Anybody else have anything else?
Just we want to make one comment, considering that kind of on the other end with regards of, I don't consider that we have enough input from the communities. And so it was, to me, important that if you already decided there's a way to improve on that aspect, that we move forward, because we have been doing this for every project that we have seen, and the community has plenty to say often, but there are a few communities that they still haven't quite caught on to the fact that they have a voice and they need to exercise it, and we're working on those communities, and one of those communities involved here, so I feel very strongly that we need to give them the opportunity to speak, and so that you can have, I think, a more robust understanding of what goes on in there. So yeah, I think that is very much needed, and I would like to see more of it.
Excellent.
And I would just like to add that, well, just with regards to, let's not fix something that isn't broken, I kind of want to thank Harmon and Sarah both for kind of pointing out that I come from a demographic that kind of likes to spruce things up, so I have to be reminded that, yes.
Easy Joe's okay.
Yeah, the gays are always moving in and fixing things up. So I just couldn't resist but to say that. But I am chairing the subcommittee on use table review, and the insights that come out of a working group like this that would be so valuable, regardless of whether it's in an area plan or how we take this. But when we go through the use tables, we can see why it's impossible to do some of these creative things that Harmon talks about, why we can't get around some of these things. There's a new limited use category that I think helps us to define criteria by which we could allow residences, and we'd like to see how we could leverage that to maybe ease our way into some of those opportunities. So without, of course, doing anything, that's going to dramatically change the character. So I think that I just wanted to kind of leverage on these things that were said to just kind of promote the idea of seeing where we can create some synergies between use table review subcommittee and this work. And Charles Farrow's on your list, and he can help bridge that to the team. So when the time is right, if there's ways we could work together. And certainly as an output, looking at recommendations for the use table changes would be really useful.
Yeah, and following up on that, when we had the use table discussion, we looked at all the limited uses, the use limitations, that were being proposed, and I think the list went up to L17. And at the time, I proposed an L18, which was a new substantive use limitation to encourage live, work, and other residential infill in already built industrial areas, so that, at the time, we said, well, that's out of the scope of this use table project. Let's talk about that when we get into the industrial zones, because none of those zones were in the opportunity zone, the area we were looking at. So, I'm just putting that out there again.
And the subcommittee really has to be aware that these efforts are things that have been taken out of our scope. We're really not supposed to be driving this. You guys are. So that's why we'll be looking to follow anything you can give us.
Yeah.
Okay, any other comments before we say, have you gotten as much feedback from us as you were hoping?
Yeah, no, it's really valuable, and I think we have a lot of good input that will make the inventory report more robust, and I think there's definitely some things folks have brought up that we missed, and so we'll go back and make sure that we study that data and include it explicitly in the report.
Okay, thanks, Kathleen. Thank you very much. Good job.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. All right. Is everybody okay to just press on to our last matter? Okay, so what this is I'll lead this one. We have our planning board application for the 2020 Boards and Commissions annual recruitment process. And Cindy distributed a letter to us that is basically the cover letter for the planning board application. And we're being asked to make suggestions or just let it be as it is. Brian sent us all an email last week because he knew he wasn't going to be at this meeting. And his suggestion was that the preamble is a good place to note attendance expectations, maybe even time commitment expectations. HAB states in theirs that applicants should expect blank hours per week as a time commitment. He says, I don't have any strong feelings on that part one way or the other, just mentioning it. They had a lively quote-unquote discussion about this last week. And then the second point that he made was the application currently only mentions the planning board ex officio seat on landmarks, but we also have a seat on Davin Greenways. Might be good to update the list and make it clear that if you're on planning board, you'll be expected to fill an ex officio or backup spot on another board too. We could also mention that there are ad hoc and subcommittee roles if you think it's helpful. And
well, HAB is an official one.
Yeah, and I think that, Greenways, I don't even know what, I was sat on Greenways as our representative, but I can't remember where the requirement is and what the planning board member who sits on Greenways is called, because we're not an ex officio member, we're just a member of the Greenways Committee. Okay. So the way I see this discussion, we could handle it in a variety of ways. One could be that we all just agree that the application's fine as it is and we don't feel like tinkering with it. Another could be, let's tinker with it now. Another could be, let's have a couple of volunteers who are willing to take some, we have a little discussion about it now, and then a couple of volunteers maybe form a subcommittee to draft changes to the letter and then come back to the next planning board meeting with those proposed changes so that we can all look at it. I think Cindy said she needs to have this finalized by October 25th. Is that correct? Okay, and so we have one planning board meeting before then? So that would be a real quick turnaround for for the subcommittee if they just wanted to respond to some of these issues about the letter. So let me just stop talking for now and see if people have thoughts. John, were you going to say something?
Well, I wasn't, but I will.
Awesome.
I was going to say something.
Okay, Sarah?
As one of the two
She was
people
gonna
who
say
most
something.
recently filled these out, I actually think that that additional information would be valuable to know how much time, what the time commitment is, and I will leave my comments at that.
Okay, John, now do you want to talk? Still?
Yeah, I don't have anything
Okay.
to say.
Lupita?
I remember the question about specifically, other than the Pearl Street Mall, which is very well known, I was thinking, wouldn't it be nice to kind of start promoting some of the more recent, other less well-known cases? Because for people who are not familiar with, God knows, I went around and I looked at some of the most recent. I talked to my neighbors, I talked to people and kind of checked things out. And I said, really some really interesting stuff happening in the city. So I do this all the time. So with regard to question 6, where specifically talked about the Pearl Street Mall, that thought that maybe just even adding other maybe less well-known but important development, I don't know, cases in the city, just to add, so that we start promoting the work that's been more recent, kind of start building the suite of well-known, well-done developments in the city. That's just add one more to the list, I will suggest.
Okay. Thoughts?
It's okay.
No thoughts?
I'm trying to think about how you would convey a pretty big deal to me, which is that this is primarily a criteria-based decision-making, and kind of ask about scenarios where people have been in environments where they've had to rely on objectivity and balance that, because it's something everyone deals with in their life at all times. And I think that it's something that is key, that we continue to keep ourselves on that right track, and that we start that as soon as the application process, because we have potentially an opportunity to make, I think public service is, has a hard, I don't think, the current status of political discourse doesn't make volunteering to work in government as attractive as it should be or could be. And I think that when the community is confused about what we're making our decisions based on, and they're not totally clear on what seems to be really confusing technical speak, that the more we can move this board over the next 10 years into that direction, which will then influence the behavior of the community to bring items that they are saying, I'm going to address this criteria as part of my comment, because that's how they see us behaving as well. So something around criteria, because a lot of people are encouraged to apply to the board by people in the community for various reasons, and they may not be fully aware that this isn't a place to pontificate or to be philosophical. It is actually oftentimes a fairly technical and scientific application, which is not nearly as much fun unless you really know what you're doing, which is why when we watch Brian go into robot mode and he can cite all this stuff, he's loving it, he's inside of it. And that's also his job oftentimes. So I think translating that early on to applicants, that's part of it, and it shouldn't scare them off. I think it's a great thing, and we're all here to do it together.
I think Brian's suggesting that the changes be made in the letter, not in the questions. So, you could telegraph that quite clearly by, simply stating, this is a quasi-judicial body most of the time, and applicants should be aware of that and understand the role of a quasi-judicial body and the procedures that they have to follow in order to render decisions.
And maybe that's it. I mean, how often are people involved in a quasi-judicial body? almost never.
They might have to go look it up.
Yeah.
So I have to disagree with this strongly. It's probably not a surprise that I'm going to disagree with you.
No, I'm actually surprised.
For a host of reasons. Obviously, a portion of the work we do is a project comes before us and we're asked to evaluate it based on the criteria. But just like now, a lot of stuff comes before us, which is not based on criteria. It's based on bringing what we know about community planning or community engagement or communities that you guys or I might not know about, who will be affected by decisions that are being made by city staff. And we live in a city where there's an expectation that the public participates, and they participate with great vim and vigor. I would be very concerned that language in a letter, that a letter that has language that is so planning oriented, so specific to the letter of the BRC is going to discourage a whole bunch of people whose voices need to be heard and need to be on this panel, and we would end up with 7 people who work in development instead of a mix of people who bring architectural expertise, community organizing expertise from marginalized communities. I just think we need to be really thoughtful about how we make, this should be an inclusive panel, not an exclusive one.
So before we go any further, does anybody feel that the current application letter and the questions are fine as is? And let's just say, who doesn't want to mess with the application and the questions? And if I got all thumbs up, we just adjourn. That's it.
I would say we don't need to mess with it.
Yeah, I don't think we need to change it. And to address that point really is when you respond, the responses that we all make, we can speak to the strengths that you have. So, you don't have to be a development person to understand codes and to do statistics and to be able to deal with, mathematics, a lot harder mathematics that all of us use. So no, I don't think that needs to be said. You can get that from what you read. The responses can tell you the strengths that people bring, and I don't think it, you can use programming to select the codes, and that's not necessary. But I think encouraging people, yeah.
Let's get back to the poll. So the question is, who thinks that we shouldn't mess with the letter at all, and we should just be done with this and move forward? I want a thumb if you think that it's done and it's good the way it is, and you don't have to put anything into it.
Except those preamble suggestions that Brian had were compelling, but those aren't part of the application.
Right, but that's part of what we're talking about tonight.
Yeah.
The letter and the questions.
Right, so
I would definitely correct the number of liaisons, since that's incorrect.
Okay.
I think,
Okay.
right, correct the number of liaisons and lay out the time commitment so that people know.
Okay, so liaisons and time commitment, I'm getting a lot of nods on that.
Yeah,
That's good.
that's all
Okay.
good.
Well, I still like the idea of communicating that a portion, and I didn't say all,
No, that's fair enough.
okay? And I don't understand anything you said in reaction to me, so we can talk about that later, because I'm confused and we won't take up time. But I think quasi-judiciary is a major point that needs to be made, and I think that it should be made more heavily.
So how would people feel about a little more descriptiveness around the role of the planning board, where, the role of the planning board is, both visionary and regulatory, and, folks who apply for planning board need to, be prepared to, listen to the public, express the community vision, and participate as quasi-judicial decision makers, something like that.
And I think you could, something like that, and you can have a phrase that's, and you will learn all about the BRC and our Boulder Valley Comp Plan, and I just worry that you end up with to quote somebody else, a permitting body rather than a planning body, and we don't need to be here if all we're going to do is rubber stamp things. So, so yes to you, and trying to speak to what you're saying is, you will learn this will be part of what your learning curve will be if you're not already in the field.
Okay, my sense is that this is too late for us to start a wordsmithing exercise. Is that right?
Yes, I think
Okay.
it's too late to do that.
Are two people willing to step up and draft language that would add in the stuff that Brian talked about in terms of time commitment and committee and other board roles, as well as a sentence around the kind of character and role of a planning board member?
I'm happy to help.
Okay, so Sarah's on?
Sarah.
Okay. So Sarah and Lupita, you want to do that and bring something back to us for the next board meeting, at which point you will probably be subjected to some wordsmithing from the other board.
She will bring, here, I will be
Okay.
at conference.
Okay?
I found something that I recommended to put in 2 years ago when I was a new planning board member, so I'll send it to you because
Great.
you're going to love it. It's all about community engagement.
Awesome.
Okay, so Hella, can we send ideas to, directly to Sarah and Lupita as our little subcommittee? Or should we send them to Cindy and let the whole planning board look at them? Or do we just go radio silent until 2 weeks from now when we get to review their work in public?
Well, I think if you guys send emails to 2 other board members and they discuss them, then you already have a meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, I think you could say Lupita and Sarah work on implementing this. It didn't sound like there were other ideas that were going
Yeah, I
to
think
be
their charge is
implemented.
pretty clear. They've got 3 things to add to the letter. And Lupita, I don't know if you want to do something around that question, but I didn't hear a lot of support for changing the Pearl Street Mall question. Okay. Okay. So can we send our own suggestions to Cindy and copy the board and give it to Sarah and Lupita to consider as they draft? Or do we just let them draft on their own until they bring it to the public?
I would just let them draft.
Okay, we're going to let you draft. We're going to take our council's advice. And we'll see you in 2 weeks with that letter
Writing my
with our 3 additions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Now, in terms of the number of hours and the number of meetings, we probably want to, well, you'll come up with what you think a planning board member needs to do to read a packet and prepare for a hearing and do a site visit for every meeting, and we probably average 2 meetings a month or something, maybe 3.
Well, we can figure that out, and if you do have sentences, fragment sentences, or complete sentences, just email them to me.
No, we're not going to do that.
Can't email them. Call me.
And,
Do it in East Boulder. Is that count?
right, and feel free by, just to ask staff if they have any thoughts, because you can talk to them. So,
You could just appoint one person and all just send to that person, and that person tries to put it together.
well, if one of you 2 want to drop off, then we could everybody could send their ideas to the other. I'm comfortable with both of you, just having coffee together and coming up with a letter for us. Which would you like? You want to do it together, Lupita?
So I'll do it.
Okay, so Sarah's going to do it,
So people can email me,
and we can email.
and then you can email, exactly.
Okay, so it's only going to Sarah. She's our subcommittee of 1.
I love those kind of subcommittees.
Yeah.
They're very efficient.
You can do it in your pajamas.
Okay, it's a pajama subcommittee. All right.
Boulder.
Okay, we're done with this, the application piece. So now we have debrief meeting and calendar check. Anybody have anything they need to debrief on? Okay, Lupita, you all right?
Brian is not here. I was going to ask him what's the update on our request to the city for training for the board. We put
Okay.
a request.
Okay, well, we'll have to wait for him to get back for that one, and we can bring that up in our debrief or matters from the planning board at the next
At the
planning board
next meeting.
meeting, which is on the 17th. That's our calendar check. Okay, so calendar check here. Who
I will not
can't
be,
make the 17th?
I won't be here.
Okay, Lupita's not making the 17th.
And I'm out until the 7th of November.
Okay.
After this one.
Okay, so very important for everyone who is here, whose name is not John or Lupita, to be at this meeting, so we have a quorum. Sorry, David.
I mean, Dave.
Am I involved in that?
Well, you're back.
Yeah, I'm back.
Okay, so we've got 4 here plus Brian, so we should have 5. Anything from staff? Any calendar issues, anything else? Okay, then I'm going to adjourn the meeting. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah, you got to have.
Live from Paris on France 24.